Hey everybody, how's it going? I have one bar on Verizon LTE right now. This is not exactly what I would call ideal, but we're gonna make the best of it. Hopefully this works. People in Maine are much nicer than people in Seattle. Do you have Tether? What carrier? You have Verizon? I use Verizon. Well, yeah, put on mobile hotspot and see what you do. Okay, here, when I put it near the window, it works. Okay, this is hysterical. I have to put my phone by the window in order for the stream to work. So luckily I got a nice long cable so that I can charge it by the window. This is a joke. Okay, so anyway, some of you may notice that if you look over here, that is from the woman from CTIA right behind him. So right behind him is I believe Lisa McCabe. She was present in the Boston hearing as well. I got my new lens. So just in the nick of time. I got this thing right before my flight. So I'm recording a high quality copy of this because I realized that this is going to be a potato with this bit rate. Yeah, this is going to be total potato quality due to the bit rate that I'm forced to stream at.
No, it's okay on my side.
Here, I got my Sony camcorder, got my new lens, charged up laptop. Yeah, people in Maine are really nice. This was a pleasure. Yeah, the audio buzzing is their mixer, so I can turn that down for now. Okay, but I don't want it to stay down because once they turn the mixer on and their mic's on, it's going to stop buzzing. Oh yeah, they are. Yeah. So I'm getting stared at by some lobbyists. That's awesome. Yeah, the line input buzzes because the mixers aren't on. I guess I'm probably gonna have to repeat that a lot of times here. But yeah, once they turn their mics on, that should go away. Yeah, I'm getting stared at by some lobbyists. This is some good stuff. They are not happy I'm here. They never are.
Someone said give them the stink eye. I can't give a stink eye. People are going to think something's stuck in my eye.
You're adorable, Erica.
It's true.
You're too nice.
So you guys will definitely see some familiar faces here. Yep, it looks like it's going to be a 3-minute talk.
I really hope they don't do that thing where the buzzer goes off in 3 minutes. Like, I can talk fast, but it's still stressful.
Also, just so you guys know, when he goes up, I'm going to be doing the camera work. Hopefully I don't make it lopsided somehow, like I did last time.
Okay, Erica, when they start talking, remind me to turn the mics on.
Okay.
I just did it to get rid of the line buzz.
Okay. Actually, do you want me to switch seats with you maybe? Because that way you're not walking over me or you don't trip on something. Garrett, I have seen the most snow I've ever seen in my life here. In New York, we had like 1 inch of snow. I saw in some sections like 1.5 feet of snow. And I saw dirty snow too.
I see bad arguments everywhere.
Oh gosh. Yeah, so if you haven't already, please thumbs up or share this video so that way everybody can go ahead and get notified of it. I didn't receive YouTube notifications of this on my phone.
I wonder if I plugged into the wrong XLR. I should double check just before. Wouldn't hurt. Same shit. Okay, I'll just go back to where I was. Yeah, they just didn't turn the mixer on yet, I suppose. No big deal.
Also, I think we are the only people filming here, so I just want to go ahead and give another shout out to our Patreons who help really fund this. And we want to go ahead and go to all these hearings as we can. Allegedly, and this might just be hearsay, someone said that they might make a decision today. We're not too sure on that, though. I'll be really excited if there is a decision made. I don't see any other camera set up.
Here's keeping fingers crossed.
Yeah, we were allowed to film here.
If my camera weren't gigantic, I'd be able to turn it around and show you how I have to put it in the windowsill with a direct line outside, or else I get no service.
Actually, I'll take a picture of it and show it to you guys on Discord if you're on.
This is ridiculous.
If you guys are on Discord, look at Discord.
Oh, we actually found out that somebody on Reddit did this actually. That's one of the lobbyists from the last video said on Twitter, oh yeah, my phone is a blank screen. I guess it's just time to get myself a new one. And what I found interesting about this is, yeah, I suppose to you it's no problem because you can just buy a new one. So I see why you see that it's not a problem that repair options are not available, because for you, you're okay with it. But I think it's fitting, at least that's logically consistent, that someone who is lobbying against repair is open to saying in public, yeah, my phone had a black screen. I guess it's time to get a new one. She wound up deleting the tweet after somebody noticed, but it was somebody on Reddit noticed it, and really big thumbs up to them for that. Discord link is going to be in the description of older videos I've done. So almost all the board repair videos I've done have a Discord in the description.
Actually, if someone can go ahead, I'll do it. If you just write !point Discord, the symbol, it will show up.
In live chat.
Yep, there
I
it is.
really want to see when I always feel nervous that they're not going to turn the mixer on and that the mics are not going to work at every hearing. And the XLRs always turn on once they decide to start recording. But each time I do this, I'm worried that it's not going to work. Stupid, but...
Okay, Hi posted the link above if you guys scroll up. Bot got overwhelmed. Oh, there it is. Thanks, Hi. By the way, you turned your phone on silent, right?
Of course.
Okay, good. Yeah, the cats are in really good hands. It looks like they're gonna start soon. So I'm gonna go ahead and be reading live chat, and I'll type in live chat. We have a few people here that have watched the YouTube channel and they came here to support. And some of them may even speak. It's hard to see because there's people sitting in the front, so a lot of these names have been blocked out on the name tags. It's supposed to start at 1 p.m., which is now. He's hoping he can speak. Seems like they're going to ask if anyone wants to speak, and all he has to do is go up. See that big, big, beautiful timer? Can you zoom out a little?
No.
We can't.
It's the only lens that was available, Erica, remember?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Sorry, you
We
guys.
were in the middle of nowhere. My lens broke in the middle of nowhere, and the only lens I could buy in a 50-mile radius that fit this camera is 55 to 200 millimeter, which is ridiculous.
We can't do anything. It was this or no videotaping
I
at all.
wanted to overnight one, but it wouldn't have arrived until Thursday afternoon, which means I wouldn't have got it in time.
We're sitting right behind a bunch of people, so that's fine. This was the only lens available at the whole Best Buy.
55 millimeter is not standard. That's crazy talk. Not like 18 into 35, maybe, but not 55. That's crazy talk.
Yes, we are. We're standing right next to the camera. I mean, sitting. We slept about 2 hours today. He's sitting right next to the camera, so you can't see him in the shot. If you go on Discord, you'll see where we're seated.
Your phone is almost dead. Would you like me to get you a charging cable?
I have my charging cable actually.
Plug it into my computer.
Okay. There's no outlet around here.
I have a ThinkPad.
Oh. I guess the ThinkPad saves the day today. That thing really is like a brick, you guys. They are on the far left in the audience section. We're on the far right. They're on the left side. Oh, thank you. No, you haven't missed anything, MD. It's just starting right now. No one has spoken yet.
The mixer still hasn't turned on. I really hope their audio setup works. People keep asking, where am I? Oh wait, they're about to start. 55 millimeters, people. This is the best view that you get. Erica, smile. Yeah, 55 millimeters is not ideal. But what are you gonna do?
I just linked the Discord link So we have, it looks like almost 1,400 people watching now. That's great.
Eli numbers.
No, you know what? These are people who could not make it.
That's
Some-
15 times Eli numbers, but still.
No, but you know, I'm happy because we're streaming it. People didn't have to make a trip over to Maine. Someone was wondering if you can just quickly pan the room. You can't really see we can't zoom out, you guys, so it is what it is.
I'm not turning off the audio channel with the humming because when they turn the mixers on, it's going to stop humming. And if I turn it off, I'm going to forget to turn it back on, and you won't have audio for the first hour of the hearing because I'm an idiot.
Oh, Sandra's watching it from Europe.
The gentleman with the cap is blocking you from seeing the CTIA lobbyist from... That is the CTIA lobbyist that I believe was in Boston. Yep, you're going to get buzzing. Enjoy the buzzing. Consider it ASMR, like when Erica is eating a salad.
Yeah, he was giving me a look. He says I chew too loud. And I said, it's just ASMR.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Committee on Innovation, Development, Economic Advancement, and Business. I apologize for our few minutes late start here. I just presented a bill in transportation, and my co-chair is out making a beer delivery because she owns a brewery in addition to being so we were so anyway, I apologize for being just a few minutes late. As my colleagues know, we always have too many things going on at once. But we're going to get right into things. So today we have a series of public hearings. We will be taking things out of order. We will be starting with LD 2004. Then we'll be taking up LD 1924, then LD 1891, and lastly, we will be taking up LD 1977. The first three we believe to be very quick orders of business, and then I know a lot of you are here for LD 1977. But we hope to move through things pretty quickly. Before we get started, we will begin with committee introductions, starting with Representative Moriarty.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome everyone. I'm Representative Steve Moriarty from District 45, which is Cumberland and part of the town of Gray.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rena Newell. I am the tribal representative for the Passamaquoddy tribe representing Indian Township and Pleasant Point.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Handy. I represent District 58, which is part of the city of Lewiston and home to Element Technologies.
Good afternoon. I'm Senator Stacey Guerin. I represent Southern Penobscot County.
Good afternoon. I'm Joe Perry. I represent part of Bangor and part of Orono in the main house.
Hi there, I'm Joel Stetkes. I represent District 105, which are the towns of Canaan, Palmyra, St. Albans, Heartland, Ripley, and Cambridge.
Stuck.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Representative Ed Crockett, District 43, which is part of Portland and part of Falmouth.
Good afternoon. I am Representative Sean Babine from Scarborough, District 29. It's the coastal part of the town.
Thank you, committee members, and I'm State Senator Erin Herbig. I represent the communities, 26 communities in Waldo County, including my hometown of Belfast. We have our legislative analyst, Sam Seneft, here, who will be taking notes during our meeting for us to review at the work session. And then we also have our committee analyst, Alyssa, who is in this corner, who, if anyone needs to be in touch with members of the committee, they can go through her. So this is also her first day with us at a public hearing, so we're delighted to have her. So So before we begin these public hearings, I just want to, I need to make an announcement that persons testifying at the public hearing today are advised that the hearing is being broadcast on the internet and may be heard by persons listening online, and that the broadcast is also being recorded. If you wish to testify, please state your name, residence, and the organization you represent, if any, and sign in at the podium. Testimony will be heard first by the sponsor and any co-sponsors, then those speaking in favor of the bill, and then those speaking in opposition to bill, and then lastly, those speaking neither for nor against the bill. If you do have any written materials, which we hope that you do, we ask that you get them to Alyssa over here in the corner. So we will, what the first two bills are actually bills that I am presenting on behalf of state organizations. So I'm going to hand the gavel over to Senator Guerin for her to take over.
So the first bill we're going to be hearing is LD 2004.
Good afternoon, fellow committee members. I am still State Senator Aaron Hervig from Waldo County. I have submitted this bill for the Finance Authority of Maine. This establishes the allocations of the state ceiling on issuance of tax-exempt private activity bonds for calendar years 2020 and 2021 among the state-level issuers of tax-exempt bonds. I know that we have a representative from FAME here who has much more detail on this issue than I do. What I will say is this is my 10th year in the legislature. This is a bill that we issue every year, so FAME can continue to do their work, and it is my request that at the end of this public hearing, we move right into work session so the Finance Authority of Maine can keep doing the very good work that they do. That's such an integral part of our state. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator Hervig. Questions from the committee? Seeing none.
Thank you.
Anyone who is in favor of the bill?
Good afternoon, Senator Guerin, Senator Hervig, distinguished members of the committee. Welcome back. It's great to be back in front of you. My name's Bill Norbert. I'm the Government Affairs and Communications Manager for the Finance Authority of Maine. And I am pleased to be here in support of this bill. We want to thank FAME and all the other issuers of private activity bonds, which include Maine Housing, the State Treasurer, the Maine Municipal Bond Bank. Wish to thank Senator Hervig for sponsoring this bill for us. This is an annual bill, and the good news is it promotes many good things for our economy, for our people, and it doesn't cost the state anything. This isn't like the typical bonds you hear about that the state issues and the voters could be on the hook for. This bill comes about because of actions at the federal level. They annually set an amount of foregone revenue, a cap, a limit, on the amount of private activity bonds that won't be taxed. And that gives bondholders an incentive to get in the game to support a variety of things. In FAME's case, we can issue these bonds for some certain manufacturers, for solid waste facilities, for student loans. Maine Housing, Mr. Peter Merrill is here, and he'll tell you all the good work they do for housing with this activity. So it's very good deeds are done with it, and the rules are set forth in the Internal Revenue Code. And annually, the private activity bond issuers get together. It's a very collegial group, and we divvy up the allocation amount that the federal government has set aside to authorize us to issue these private activity bonds. And they're for public purposes, really. In our case, as I said, we help stimulate economic development, and we help student loan borrowers. And the other issuers do their good things too. So we hope you'll support it. As usual, you have before you a chart which shows how the money's been used over the year. You'll see most of it reverts back, isn't used, but if we need it, we use it. The two biggest users tend to be Maine Housing and FAME, and you can see that reflected in the bar chart. But the vast amount of money gets carried over to the next year. We can divvy it up, and then it reverts back and is lost. But this happens every year. New amounts are set. So we hope you'll support it. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, your presentation was very thorough.
Thank you very much.
Good
Senator
afternoon.
Garin, Senator Herbig, members of the Joint Committee. My name is Peter Merrill, Deputy Director at Maine Housing. Mr. Norbert has explained how we use these bonds. I would simply add that many of you hear me over the years talk about how the independent authorities use private methods for public purposes, and that's kind of what makes us unique. This is exactly what we're talking about. This is exactly how we're able to do it. The other thing I would simply say is when you hear us at ribbon cuttings and that sort of thing, and we call out the electeds who are there and we thank them for giving us the tools to work with, again, this is exactly what we're talking about. So this allows us to do first-time homebuyer loans, which some of you are familiar with, or most of you are familiar with, as well as to create new affordable apartments. With that, I would thank you very much and encourage your support.
Questions from the committee? Representative Steckes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Merrill. Just looking at this chart real quick, I see there's a major disparity from 2020, 2021 Maine State housing allocations as compared to the rest of the chart. Can you give us an idea why there's such a difference?
I can. At the beginning of the year, we do the allocation, which is set out in this bill. And what this bill basically does is it makes an allocation for 2021 so that when we get to January 1st, we don't have to wait for you to come into session. And it makes adjustments to 2020, which a bill you would have passed last year, and if there are any. And for many of the issuers, the bonds expire at the end of the year. So on December 31st, they just disappear. You can carry the bonds forward for housing and for education, so you can carry them ahead 3 years. So what happens is the legislature authorizes the issuers. We all sit down sometime around Christmas time and have a meeting, and everybody turns back what they haven't used and projects anything they might need till the end of the year. And then everything else is returned to FAME or Maine Housing. And as you can see, the biggest slug goes back to Maine Housing. And so we simply haven't, for the two large blue sticks at the end, that simply hasn't happened yet, but will.
Other questions? Representative Crockett.
Thank you, Senator. I notice MMBB, is that a new allocation for the first time?
No, the bond bank usually takes $10 million and frequently returns it, but they take it at the beginning, so they have it if they need it. Well, they've taken the $10 million at the beginning of each year, and they've usually handed it back at the end.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else who would like to testify in favor of 2004?
These people are
Anyone
also
in
nice.
opposition to this bill? Anyone who would like to speak neither for nor against? Seeing none? Close this public hearing, and I believe we may have a motion. Representative Handy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that we go into work session for consideration of LD 2004.
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none? All those in favor? All those opposed? That is unanimous. Close the workshop on,
Motion to move into workshop, or into work session.
motion to move into work session for this bill?
So we'll move into work session, and then we'll be looking for a motion.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I move-
Representative Handy.
I move on to pass on LD 2004.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of passage? Those opposed? Unanimous? That bill passes. Close the public hearing.
Great.
Close the workshop.
Yeah, got it. All right, we are now.
Next, we will be hearing 1924, and Senator Herbig will be presenting that bill. Do they say Senate paper?
No, it's only, I just noticed.
Are you saying I should say that number?
No.
No.
I can't even
Oh, 666. It's like I don't need to say for Senate paper.
Good afternoon again. I'm still State Senator Aaron Herbig from Waldo County. I am this bill I am presenting on behalf of the Department of Professional and Financial Regulation. They have a representative here who will provide a lot more information. But what this bill does is current law prohibits a real estate appraisal management company from removing without written notice to the affected appraiser an appraiser from its appraiser panel, exception within first 30 days after the appraiser has been added to the panel. This bill removes the exception that authorizes removal without notice within the first 30 days after being added to the panel. More information coming, but I would try to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions for Senator Herbig from the committee? Seeing none,
Thank you all.
anyone who would like to testify in favor of 1924, step right up.
Good afternoon, Senator Gehring and members of the committee. My name is Karen Bivens. I am the administrator for the Board of Real Estate Appraisers, a licensing board within the Office of Professional and Occupational Regulation in the Department of Professional and Financial Regulation. I'm here today to speak in support of LD 1924. First, I'd like to thank Senator Herbig for presenting this bill. The Board of Real Estate Appraisers licenses both individual appraisers as well as appraisal management companies, or as they're commonly called, AMCs. There is also a federal oversight component for all jurisdictions that regulate appraisers and AMCs. The various jurisdictions have direct responsibility for licensing and regulating appraisal practice, but those regulations are very much influenced and directed by federal regulations. As part of the federal oversight, each jurisdiction is audited every 2 years for compliance with standards set by the appraisal subcommittee. That's the federal oversight organization. Maine's last audit was in June of 2019. Happy to report we had an excellent rating. But because of the delay in full implementation of our AMC program, our last audit did not include that component. The auditors, however, who were assigned to Maine did review the AMC statute to see if there were any issues as a preliminary effort to notify the board. As a result of that review, it was noted that the section of the statute that's the subject of this bill allows an AMC to remove an appraiser from a panel within the first 30 days of being on the panel without written notice. That exemption is not allowed. Any appraiser who is removed from a panel must receive written notice regardless of how long they've been on the panel. So in order for us to be in compliance with our next audit, this bill has been presented as a time-sensitive correction. I'd be happy to answer any questions or...
Thank you very much. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Others who would like to testify in favor of this bill? Anyone in opposition to 1924? Seeing none. Anyone who would like to speak neither for nor against on 1924? Seeing none. I would declare the public hearing closed on 1924.
Thank you, Senator Garin. Job well done. We will now be moving right along here to LD 1891, an act to protect Maine propane consumers upon the termination of an agreement between a dealer and a consumer. Representative Matlock of St. George. Do we not have her here? Is anyone here to testify on the bill? You are? Okay, great. Why don't we just try and give one call to Representative Matlock, and then we'll go on from there. Great, thank you. Please just give us a few moments. Thank you. We'll be at ease for just a few minutes. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
So we will now open up the public hearing on LD 1891, an act to protect Maine propane consumers upon the termination of an agreement between a dealer and a consumer. Welcome, Representative.
Thank you very much, Senator. Good afternoon, Senator Herbig, Representative Daughtry, and honorable members of the Innovation, Development, Economic Advancement, and Business Committee. My name is Ann Matlack, and I represent the District 92 communities of Cushing, Thomaston, South Thomaston, St. George, Matinicus, Creehaven, and the Muscle Ridge Islands. I'm here today to present LD 1891, an act to protect Maine propane consumers upon the termination of an agreement between a dealer and a consumer. One of my constituents recently brought to my attention a problem he was having with his propane delivery company, a problem I have come to find out affects many folks across the state. My constituent had been pre-buying propane from a company for at least 10 years. As we are all likely to do, my constituent stayed with that vendor because they were automatically delivering propane to his house, and he had never had concerns about deliveries or service. Last summer, my constituent looked at what he was paying for propane and what other vendors in the area were charging, and he found he was paying at least $1 more per gallon than his neighbors. So made arrangements to move his account to another vendor. That's when he discovered the company he had been dealing with for 10 years had changed its service contract language, and once he received his next delivery after the new service contract was implemented, he had by default agreed to the changes. Among other issues, he found he would now be charged an annual fee on the 10-year-old propane tanks, and that he would not be compensated for any fuel left in the tank should he cancel his contract. Additionally, he would be charged to remove the propane from the tanks and to take the tanks away. So not only would he lose the $725 he had already paid to pre-buy the fuel, he would be charged $200 to remove the tanks and their fuel. In a previous work life, I did purchasing for the city of Rockland, and I know that this is not the way reputable vendors operate. This is not the way my propane dealer operates. Most businesses want to keep their customers, especially long-term customers, but there is nothing currently in statute to protect customers from less than honorable vendors taking their money and then their propane. LD 1891 provides that upon the termination of an agreement between a propane dealer and a customer, the propane dealer must compensate the customer for the propane remaining in the customer's tank at a rate equal to the market price of the propane on the date that the agreement is terminated, or the price that the customer paid for the propane, whichever is less, with the provisos that a customer must have paid for the propane, the amount of the propane is more than 5 gallons, and the customer has not received compensation pursuant to this section in the previous 12 months. It costs about $300 to fill a 120-gallon propane tank at today's prices. That is quite an investment for many people. A customer should not be penalized their entire investment in fuel plus service charges if they decide within a reasonable amount of time that they want to move their account. This bill will ensure customers are safeguarded from vendors who may try to keep the propane their customers have already purchased without just compensation. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Great. Thank you, Representative Matlock. Questions from members of the committee? Representative Handy.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Representative, for bringing this forward. I just have a question of pretty much clarification. When you said your constituent discovered that the company that he'd been dealing with for 10 years had changed its service contract language, was he made aware of the language, or was it just renewal by default?
Renewal by default. He had been there for a number of years, apparently, and this was last summer when he discovered it. Apparently, the fall before, the company had come out with a new service agreement, and the notification was via email, hey, there's something coming out. I have delivered to you a letter from my constituent explaining what had happened. But it was not specific, and it was going forward, if you purchase additional fuel, you will have agreed to this contract.
Huh. So there's no opt-out?
No.
No other kind of notification other than saying we've changed the terms of our contract?
Right, yeah. It went from an original 1-page document to a 7-page document.
That's quite a change.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for the representative? Senator Guerin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make sure I understood. He did see the 7-page contract.
I think eventually he did. After the fact, he saw the contract. I think the notification came out in an email, and you had to click on the link and then go to the email, and he may not have done that. And when he went to cancel his contract, that's when he became aware of the fact that the service agreement had changed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Representative Crockett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just clarification. Obviously, if you change from AmeriGas in this case to another vendor, you obviously know you have to purchase new tanks.
I don't know that purchase is the right word.
Okay.
From my experience, the tanks belong to the company. A different company, the company you're with will come and take the tanks away. The company you want to deal with will install new tanks.
Right.
It's not necessarily a purchase. I guess the lease is part of the amount of money that you pay over a monthly, or as you pay for the propane that's delivered there. Although this company also included in their updated service agreement that going forward, there would be an annual fee paid to rent the tanks.
Right.
But it's not, they're not purchased. They don't belong to you. Most of the time, they belong to the company that supplies the propane.
So there has to be a clean
Right.
change by
Right.
vendor.
Right.
Okay.
Representative Moriarty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are you aware, Representative, whether the removal fee cost in this particular case was out of line with suppliers or providers?
I did talk to my local vendor, and they said they would work with the client. There may be a fee involved, but it wasn't the whole taking of everything in the tank. Because there is an expense for somebody to come down, remove the tank, empty the tank, there could be. And my vendor's language is may. We may assess a fee if you change companies. It doesn't say we shall.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
We'll now open it up to any co-sponsors of this legislation. Welcome, Representative Hobbs.
Thank you.
Alyssa, right over here. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Senator Herbig, Representative Daughtry, and members of the Innovation Development, Economic Advancement, and Business Committee. I am Representative Daniel Hobbs, and I represent part of the town of Wells. I'm here today to support LD 1891, an act to protect Maine propane consumers upon the termination of an agreement between a dealer and a consumer. At its core, this legislation is about protecting consumers and making sure that they are being treated fairly. Given Maine's long winters, all of us understand the critical role propane plays in our state. This resource allows us to stay warm and safe, however, it comes at a cost. In November of last year, the average price per gallon for propane in Maine was $2.45. While this may not seem high, given that a standard propane tank holds 96 gallons of propane, this equates to over $235 per tank. Our energy costs are already high. Maine energy users should not face additional costs if they decide to change their propane service. This bill will allow for the compensation of consumers for any remaining propane in their tank, as long as the 5-gallon minimum is met. It will make sure that Maine energy customers are not double charged for the propane within their tank. This is a simple step that will make a huge difference for Mainers as they work hard to keep their homes warm in the dead of winter. I thank you for allowing me to share my perspective. I'll be glad to answer any questions to the best of my ability.
Great. Thank you, Representative Hobbs. Questions from members of the committee? Seeing none.
Thank you.
For joining us. All right, we will now open up for testimony for anyone in favor of LD 1891. Anyone that wishes to testify in favor of the bill. All right, seeing no more, we will now move on to anyone that wishes to testify in opposition to LD 1891. Oh, welcome. Yep, and if you could bring these over to Alyssa here to distribute to the committee. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name's Leslie Anderson. I live in Cumberland, Maine, and I'm the president of a regional energy trade association, the Propane Gas Association of New England. We represent over 800 members that sell propane throughout the 6 New England states. And we exist to serve the community of the propane industry through work promoting safety, education, and public awareness of propane uses. Here in Maine, I'm representing the 130 member-based companies of our organization, and we have propane locations at 107 different towns throughout the state. I've passed out some information to you about propane and its importance as a green fuel. It's an alternative EPA-approved fuel. It's very clean burning. It's not a greenhouse gas, and it doesn't contain any toxic. It's not harmful to our environment at all. Propane is vital for energy security here in our state. When the power goes out, propane generators provide backup at the majority of the hospitals that we have and at other strategic locations throughout the state. It's a perfect partner for wind and solar. Today I'm testifying in opposition to LD 1891. Most of our main members of our association are family-owned. Many of them are small local businesses. We don't need a specialty bill for something that's already covered under the Maine Uniform Commercial Code. And enacting this bill would cause potentially abuse and confusion. One of the roles I have as the head of the industry association is I take a lot of calls throughout the year in the 6 states that I work if there is a customer complaint. And I would encourage any legislature that ever has a customer reach out to them to reach out to me, and I can reach out to the propane company, and unless there's something that's completely invalid in the claim, I can usually take care of those for you.
Thank you for that offer.
Yes, please do. We want to make sure that our customers are taken care of. One of the things that I do in the state of New Hampshire where I work is I take all of the Attorney General calls that come in regards to propane. They're immediately directed to our office. It's unique for that state compared to the others. So over my tenure in the last 3 years in my role, I've taken a variety of calls that come in. I've had one call come up that was this same issue where a customer was complaining about being reimbursed for product that was left in their tank. And in this case, the customer had changed suppliers, but they hadn't notified their existing supplier. They were on will call. They hadn't called them for a delivery, and that provider hadn't provided a refund because they didn't know they had switched to another customer. So we were able to resolve that and get it worked out for the customer's benefit. There's lots of problems with the language, the way it's written, and so I would ask first that you just let this already be covered under existing law that's out there. But if you can't do that, I have listed some bullet points on the back of my testimony about some of the problems that are there. Many of our companies also may have contracts for service and agreements with their customers on other things. They might be doing installs, adding a decorative fireplace or something outdoors for them. So the termination of agreement is not specific. I think that you're trying to get at if they're changing the tank out and the tank is going away, that the customer gets reimbursed for the product in the tank that is leaving their site, but the way it's written, it's not specific. I own my own tank, so if I cancel my contract under this law, I could then call my propane company up and have them reimburse me for all the fuel left in my tank, and then I could probably use it. So it's just not, specifically written the way that the language is in there. There's also complications that could arise as homeowners move out or as tenants move out. In the winter, you've got to keep the home warm. So if one homeowner sells and they terminate their agreement, do we have to pay that homeowner when the new person is going to be moving into the house and using the propane? How does that work out? There's all these different variables that are there. And then there's lots of commercial applications as well that are problems. So if this were to go forward, it definitely needs to be limited to residential locations because we do temporary heat contracts, our members all over the state, and they usually provide those on temporary sites with a cost based on the gallons that they're going to use, and they go. And in those contracts, it's very common to say, if you have anything left over, you don't get a refund for that because they've built into that price all the delivery that they have to do to go out. When you get your propane at your house, it's not like when you order an appliance. You don't get a $75 delivery charge unless you're having somebody come out as an emergency call or something after hours. We deliver, the majority of our customers are delivered to, and the fees are built into the overall price that's there. So propane, in conclusion, it's not a regulated utility. It's a competitive free marketplace. There's lots of choices for people. Your contract will be different depending on the size of the tank. depending on the number of gallons that you use, the more gallons you buy, it's like going to Sam's Club. If you buy in bulk, it's a lower price. If you buy less, there's a higher price. If you're only buying a few gallons a year, then you probably will get charged for the tank that's out there, because those tanks are expensive and they're an asset that has to be recouped from the company. So please, I'm happy to resolve any of these issues that come up so we can take care of them right away. But I would ask that you just let this be covered under existing law, and I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Yes, absolutely. Representative Perry.
Thank you. Perhaps an unrelated question, but your flyer says propane's renewable. Where does propane come from?
So the majority of the propane, then the abundant propane that we use here today, it's a beneficial byproduct from natural gas production. It's actually an underutilized resource. Much of the propane that's not used here in the U.S. is just burned. And what we use is left over from natural gas processing, the propane. But there's also renewable propane that's developed, and it's available in small quantity, and it comes from biodiesel. And there's a portion of that is a beneficial byproduct from it as well. And there's research underway with algae that would convert into propane as well. So we see it as a perfect partner for renewable energy going forward. When the sun and the wind's not shining, propane can operate those facilities. It doesn't have any toxics like you would encounter if you were going to a big battery storage or something like that. It's very environmentally friendly, and as you transition, it's a chemical formula. It's only hydrogen and carbon that's in it. So when you go to renewable propane, it's exactly the same. You don't have to retrofit your device at all.
Great, thank you. Representative Stekis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Probably not nearly as fun, but actually pertains to what we're here for today. You mentioned several times, actually, the under current law. Could you give us an idea, under current law, what pertains in current law to these types of cases? And you keep referring back to, let current law take care of it. Could you explain that a little bit more, please?
Sure. Well, Maine's adopted the Universal Commercial Code, which covers the bill of sales for any sales that are there, and that code says that it's governed by contract, or if there's not a contract in place, then there's a set of principles that you have to follow. So if this was a customer that didn't have a contract in place and they owned that propane that was left there, they would be able to go to the law court if they didn't get a refund and, file in small claims court to get reimbursed if they couldn't come up with a remedy already on it. We wouldn't want it to get to that. I'd much rather somebody reach out to me if they're having a problem like that so that I can work directly with the company and try to resolve it.
Follow-up, Representative Stekis.
Thank you. So just to clarify, so what you're saying is, under current law, they want to enforce. You would like to have it enforced that an agreement between two people, a legal binding agreement between two people, is actually followed as opposed to creating something else.
Yes, the contracts are negotiable. When they're out there, you do have to give notice if you're changing your contract terms. So I don't know the particulars of what the complaint was in this matter, but, they would have to meet certain guidelines like they would for any sale of goods for that contract to apply.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Handy, then Representative Moriarty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here to answer our questions. Sure. We appreciate it. The example that was cited by Representative Matlack about the terms and conditions just kind of sneaking up, if you will, my terms, not hers, on a customer when they get an email, our terms and conditions have changed. Is that how most propane dealers operate?
I don't believe so, because you need to give notice and make sure that you've given it where the customer knows that you have it. So I can't really speak specifically to what each company is doing individually, but we do have a representative that will be testifying after me from Dead River that can give you the examples of what they see and is probably closer to it than I am.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Representative Moriarty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Anderson, I just want to present a very brief hypothetical. Suppose the original provider has delivered, let's say, 100 gallons to a customer. The customer then decides to change suppliers, and that 100 gallons is in the tank. The original supplier will pump that 100 gallons out and remove the tank ordinarily. Is that fair to say?
So that could be the scenario that happens, but if the customer has paid for it and their contract says that they don't get a refund on those gallons, they could always work with their new provider to let them know when were getting low on gallons, so that they use the propane that they've already bought in that tank, and then they switch over when it's getting low. And I mean, there's ways around that contract language if they need to.
Okay.
If they were tied to it, where they could use the propane themselves and then switch over.
All right, apart from the actual contract, though, let me just continue with a hypo, one more step. If the original supplier does in fact pump the 100 gallons out, is that fuel sellable to other customers? Or is it deemed to be contaminated or
No.
lesser quality
No.
or anything of that nature?
Yeah, it would be recycled and sold to another customer.
At the current market
Yeah.
rate or whatever?
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. So if you don't have a contract in place, what would happen is they would credit you back for those gallons, that were there, if there was no contract in place saying that you didn't receive your gallons back at the end.
Okay. Yes, Representative Crockett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Back to Representative Matlock's constituent, Mr. Hamlin, who brought up the original case. Did he reach out to you?
No.
At any time? That's what I suspected. Would he have known to reach out to you? Is there anything there that would have directed them to?
People find me on the internet a lot.
Go
We
to
have
the
a big
problem
web page, and then I'm very close with the governor's energy office. All of the complaints that come in the state of Maine to an office get directed to the governor's energy office, and I work with Lisa Smith there. If she gets a complaint, she'll reach out to me that way as well. So there are ways to find out, and to get in touch with us.
Yeah, a little difficult if, for example, here they reached out to their state rep, who may or may not have known that you were the resource to help solve these complaints. Feels like there's a little gap there in communication.
There is. We're actually doing a mailing that's going to be going out in the next week or two to all of the state reps in all the states that we locate. And one of the things is contact us if you have any questions or complaints or anything about it. So it is something that we're trying to do more education on within our own association.
That segues well into my question. My request of you, Ms. Anderson, is I'm wondering if you would be willing to meet with Representative Matlock between now and our work session to discuss this situation and the bill generally speaking, and I would really appreciate if both of you could come back to that. I'd be interested to see what comes out of that conversation. Is that something that you both
Certainly,
can do?
yes.
Okay, great.
And if the customer still has a problem, I'd like to try to resolve that if we can.
That would be wonderful, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So, maybe we can resolve this, if we could resolve this without legislation, that would be ideal. So I would like to see if we can make that possible. So thank you in
Sure.
advance for your effort.
Yeah.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, anyone else that wishes to testify in opposition to LD 1891?
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
Chair Herbig, members of the committee, my name is Dan Riley. I'm going to try to write while I speak, move things along for you. I'm an attorney at the firm of Norman Hanson at Troy, and I'm here today representing our client, the Maine Energy Marketers Association. And since Ms. Anderson did a nice job covering the waterfront for the most part, I will just give you some brief kind of examples of how issues like this have been resolved before, at least in my history representing the association. So, Representative Perry, Senator Perry, a while ago, your question was an Energy Committee question, obviously. The members of the Energy Committee are a little bit more familiar with this, but these issues kind of do bounce around between committees historically. And so in addition to the Uniform Commercial Code that Representative Steck has asked about, we also have the Maine Unfair Trade Practices Act. And on occasion, for a variety of different reasons, there have been issues where there have been propane dealers who, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I think it's important for you to understand. There were propane dealers who purchased a company. That company had a list of customers. And they had assets like the trucks and tanks and employees and everything to service those customers. But if too many of those customers were what are called will call customers, as referenced by Ms. Anderson, those are customers who are customers that have to call the supplier, the propane dealer, to tell them, I need more propane, then the dealer has no way of knowing when those calls are going to come. And if you have too many will call customers and not enough, pre-buy customers, where you're on a regular system like most of us are, who have regular deliveries, and the dealer has a schedule, essentially. They know how much propane you use in a month, and based on what the temperature is outside, they've got a good idea. So you always have enough propane if we have a real cold snap. Well, you remember we had a real cold snap, was it a year ago? January. And there was one particular company that had just been purchased, and Senator Garin is nodding her head because she remembers this, and they had too many will call customers and not enough trucks, essentially. And so what ended up happening was the trade association got the calls saying we got a problem. And Senator Diamond and Representative Garin and others contacted the trade association, and the trade association, working with its other members, made sure that those customers got the propane. They weren't even under contract or regular customers of some of the other companies in the area, but everybody got together and made sure that during that cold snap, everybody got what they needed to stay warm. That's really the way that this works. One more quick example for you to give you a sense of the industry. When this bill came forward and was printed, we had a call of what's called the Heating Fuels Committee of MEMA. One of the members of the Heating Fuels Committee, Charlie Page, is with Maritime Energy, and he is located in Representative Matlack's neck of the woods. And so he immediately said, I'll go see her, find out what the problem is. And he did. And Representative Matlack referenced that. I believe she's a customer of his. I think so. And so anyway, he went down. What's wrong? What happened? What's the problem? And it turned out, it wasn't his company, but that's the way that the industry tries to deal with these types of issues. So you got the Uniform Commercial Code to deal with contractual issues. You got the Unfair Trade Practices Act. And then you've got the way things are done by the members of Ms. Anderson's trade association and my client, the Maine Energy Marketers. Given all of that, I think there's a pretty good safety net out there for customers who find themselves in a tough situation. I take your suggestion. We've already done it with Mr. Page going down to see the representative, and I'm happy to talk with her as well about what we might be able to do to resolve this. But as you know, legislation is a big hammer sometimes, and if there's a better and more surgical way to deal with an issue, I think that may be the best way to handle this. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Any questions from anyone from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for joining us today. Anyone else who wishes to testify in opposition to LD 1891?
This is the guy you really want to ask because he knows the stuff.
Welcome.
There's no pen, and I don't have one on me to sign in. I'll leave it up here. Senator Herbig, members of the committee, my name is Casey Crampton. I am a resident of Gorham. I am also the Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Dead River Company, a marketer of propane in the state of Maine and also other states in northern New England. And I'm also on the board of directors of a national organization called the Propane Education and Research Council. I am here today in opposition of LD 1891, namely because of the language, the way of the language in the bill. I am concerned that there are some other types of scenarios that are not being considered in the language of this bill. For example, when agreements terminate, there are numerous different types of agreements that exist with the relationship between a propane marketer and the customer. One example are price protection agreements that typically run annually from the beginning of a heating season to the end of the heating season. And when the heating season ends and that agreement terminates, it does not necessarily mean that the relationship between the marketer, the dealer, and the customer comes to an end. And so as written, if we get to an end of a heating season and the agreement that we have with the customer comes to a conclusion, and there is still propane remaining in the tank, then we, or me as a marketer, am obligated to compensate the customer for the product that remains in the tank, and they can continue to use it at no charge. And so there's a language issue there for me in the bill as it's written today. Secondly, I will just add that I don't think that this is a pervasive issue in our industry. And the reason I say that is because at my company, I read and hear from customers as well, but I read thousands of customer comments that come in on an annual basis. I'm happy to report that the bulk of those comments are positive. Occasionally there are issues or they are negative, but in the past year to 2 years, I cannot recall one instance of receiving a negative comment that is related to the scenario that we're talking about today. And so with that, I will say that I am more than happy to work with the committee if you would like my assistance on this, and I'm happy to entertain questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crampton. Questions from members of the committee? Representative Stickis.
Somebody's been messing with this thing. Thank you, Mr. Crampton. Basically, along the lines of my question earlier, you do mention in your testimony that the bill is potentially misaligned with already existing statute in Title 10. Can you sort of give us a little bit of an explanation of how Title 10 could possibly cover this?
Yeah, I made reference, Title 10 covers pre-buy pricing agreements and other types of fixed pricing agreements. And with that, there's an obligation in there that marketers who offer those type of agreements have to go out and cover the product so that the customers are protected. And as such, the way this is worded, those contracts that we engage with our suppliers, the product has to be taken and as such, we then have to move it and sell it. And so because of that obligation to sell product and then take it back, and there are situations where we might not be able to then market it again in quick fashion could create a conflict.
Senator Guerin.
Thank you for being here today. One scenario that came to my mind that might happen if this bill was passed is if people were buying it at the will call and then it came to the end of the season and they really would just like to have the money through the summer, maybe fill up their tank while the prices were low, they could force you to pay them for what was in there and then buy at a lower price. Is that possible?
I believe so, the way you described it, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee for Mr. Crampton? No. Seeing none, thank you for being here today. Anyone else who wishes to testify in opposition to LD 1891? Seeing none, anyone that wishes to testify neither for nor against this piece of legislation? Seeing none, that ends our public hearing on LD 1891. And I would ask if you could connect with the representative between now and the work session. We look forward to seeing you back here. All right, moving right along. We will now open up the public hearing on LD 1977, an act to ensure a consumer's right to repair certain electronic products. Welcome, Senator Carpenter. It is always nice to see you.
Thank you, Senator Herbig. Always nice to see you. My first time before the IDEA Committee. I'm honored. Thank you for allowing me to come and present LD 1977. I'll give you just a bit of history. I was asked to present this bill, recognizing that there are perceived problems out there with the right of consumers and other purchasers of equipment with digital electronic components, parts, to fix those as they break down. And so I agreed to do that. It is grown to a scope that I did not intend, and I want to begin by that and take responsibility for that. Nobody's fault but my own. I wasn't on top of things, the drafting perhaps as I should have been. As a result of that, persons and organizations, certainly in the heavy equipment manufacturing and sales business, have come to believe that this is aimed at them, and I don't know what the original intent. This is a national movement. Not that I've been in touch with any of the folks of the national movement, but I know that in at least 22 other states this legislation has been proposed. So as I told the equipment folks at lunchtime today, I had a meeting with some of them and said, you know, when you have this much smoke, chances are there's some fire somewhere, and I would suggest that they get in front of it rather than keep coming into this legislature and other legislatures day in and day out and time again to try to defeat these kinds of things. If I spend money, a lot of money in most cases, to purchase that or to purchase a $500,000 skidder, I expect service. I expect it to work, and as a part of that, typically I'll get a warranty. Well, the warranty is no good to me whatsoever if I can't A, get the parts to fix it, and B, get the people to fix it, because I darn sure I'm not going to tear this thing apart and try to fix it myself. So I think one of the first things we have to try to figure out is there a problem, and if there's a problem, what's the scope of the problem? I've been a little guy most of my life, and I've always been very much opposed to what I call a closed shop. When I first started to practice law in northern Maine, I learned how to do a title search, but I found pretty quickly that I was shut out of the title search business because that business was usually directed by the realtor or the banker to a certain lawyer or firm of lawyers in the town, and that always frustrated me greatly. So my opinion is that if manufacturers of the equipment as described in this bill are not making qualified personnel available to fix the equipment or parts available to fix the equipment, then they're doing a disservice not only to the persons they're selling to, but also to themselves ultimately in the long run. There are persons that believe that this bill is only designed for small consumer electronics and what I call the inert parts. I have a fairly new pickup truck. I've never taken my truck, even though it's still under warranty, I've never taken my truck back to the dealership. I haven't needed to. When I want the tires rotated, I go to my local mechanic who went to high school with me. When I want the oil changed, I go to the same guy. That's not going to void the warranty. I'm not going to ask him to diagnose a problem with the engine or to put electronic diagnostic equipment on that engine, because that probably would void the warranty. My point is, I guess, let's take the skidder, for example. If I pay $500,000 for a piece of equipment to work in the woods and it goes down on me, and I can't get the parts or the service to get that back up every day that's down, it's costing me a lot of money. And that piece of property that I paid a lot of money for is totally useless. I asked somebody who's in the business who I have great respect for, my brother-in-law, and I said, what's the issue here? What's driving this? Is it that there's not an availability of parts issue? Is it a cost issue? Or what is it? And He guesstimated, and I think the people that may come behind me here who testify on behalf of the equipment manufacturers, that it's both. That it's both. My sense of it is maybe it's the availability of service and service technicians and qualified, they're defined in here as authorized retail providers, I believe, repair providers, the availability of them to come and fix that piece of equipment so it can get back to work. I don't know what the scope of the problem is. So I guess what I'm going to ask you is to take this bill as a vehicle and to use it to try to define what the scope of this problem is. And are we really talking about consumer electronics, my cell phone, or are we talking about that $500,000 skidder? The bill appears in Section 3 to exclude a motor vehicle. Well, I think the language is pretty, from a lawyer's perspective, if that's what you want to do, if you want to pass this bill, exclude motor vehicles. So, most of the heavy equipment that I've been mentioning is excluded under Title 29A as a motor vehicle, but I will leave with your analyst a proposed amendment that would give you a whole laundry list of entities that I wish to have excluded if that's what you want to do with this bill going forward. My preference would be that you use this bill as a vehicle to try to decide if there's a problem out there in the electronics field. And this is a big question, a big issue I'm leaving with you. If so, what's the scope of that problem? And what do we need to do to fix it? Currently, we don't have any state agency that would certify or train or oversee these kinds of technicians to do this kind of sophisticated electronic repair work. So we would have to create that bureaucracy, and I'm not sure that's what I ever intended in this bill. So I believe that the equipment manufacturers, who seem to be part of this bill, whether they like it or not, or whether they ever were intended, are willing to work with the committee or work with the legislature and to try to define what the scope of that problem is. As I told them, if this is something that's coming up nationwide, if this is something that's coming back time and time again, then there's a problem up there, and they need to be part of the solution, and they need to get out front on it. And they suggested, at least the folks that I talked to at lunchtime, that they were more than willing to do that. With that, I'll be more than happy to take questions from the committee.
Thank you, Senator Carpenter. Questions from members of the committee? Representative Perry.
Thank you, Senator. So my cell phone, I've broken a lot of screens on those, and Apple's been pretty good to me, but the Apple store's in Portland.
Right.
There's a guy who does screens right in Bangor. So if I break my screen, bring it to the guy to replace it in Bangor, have I voided my warranty for future problems with Apple? Is that kind of the scenario?
Yes, that is certainly one of the scenarios that's been mentioned to me a lot. I'm given to believe, and I haven't looked at the warranty on your phone, frankly, I haven't looked at the warranty on my phone. I don't know if that will breach the warranty or not. What I was trying to get at here was the availability of people to work, and the only term I could come up with was the inert parts of this equipment. Again, I don't void my warranty when I have my mechanic, my buddy, change the oil. So I would argue that shouldn't breach the warranty. Knowing your analyst, as I do, having worked with him all summer, I'm sure that he can come up with a far better definition than I can. But that's the kind of thing that I would like to address with this. But again, I think there's a bigger problem out there. If it's too much for the committee to get its arms around this session, so be it. But that's where I'm headed with this.
Any other questions for Senator Carpenter? So, Senator, I just want to clarify so make sure I understand what you're asking. So you're basically saying that this is not the bill. Let's strike this, and what your request is that perhaps we could have a state agency look to identify if there is some kind of problem.
Yes, and given the fact, again, the number 22 states keeps coming up and talking to folks, that there are at least, this issue has come forward in at least 22 states. I believe California and perhaps Massachusetts have passed something like this. So I think we could get the data, Sam could get the data for you in terms of what's happened in other states. Is it that big a problem, or is it just normal? I mean, we've always, it used to be you got a 40-20 John Deere and you got your cousin to come out and fix it when it broke down in the field. Not quite so simple anymore, to use a farm analogy. So I don't know the scope of the problem.
Okay.
Thank
right.
you so much.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to
Yes.
leave that amendment that I spoke of with your analyst, and if you decide to go forward, I would ask you to exclude those.
Great.
Make it very clear that those are to be excluded.
Great. Thank you, Senator Carpenter. All right, do we have any co-sponsors in the room? It looks like we do have a few. Yeah.
We do.
Welcome,
Senator.
Representative Ziegler.
Thank you, Senator Herbig. Good afternoon, Senator Herbig and the distinguished members of the Innovation, Development, Economic Advancement, and Business Community. My name is Stanley Page Ziegler Jr., and I represent District 96, consisting of the towns of Belmont, Liberty, Lincolnville, Montville, Morrow, Palermo, and Searsmont. I am here today to support LD 1977, an act to ensure consumers' right to repair certain electronic products. Senator Carpenter certainly made a good opening in regards to this, and I also agree that the complexity of this problem may be beyond this bill. But I was contacted by a constituent regarding the right to repair movement. There has been an effort, as we've talked about, to introduce similar bills in 22 states, and California has been leading that. This movement has developed from frustrated consumers experiencing difficulty in repairing their items in a timely manner and at a reasonable cost. Some of you may be surprised to know that I spent much of my 20s working as a logger here in Maine. When our equipment or machines broke down, we would make the repairs in the field if we could, and if we didn't get paid. So we needed to repair those machines in a timely fashion. Nowadays, the machines are far more complex, as most in life is right now, that you have to call a dealer to order specialized parts and schedule service. If they aren't able to get the dealer to come to the job site to do the repair, you have to move the machine to the repair shop. This leads to time and money lost, not to mention the more expensive price of having to work solely with the dealer. Another issue the consumers highlight is that rather than being allowed to have items repaired at a modest price by local people, they are encouraged to purchase newer items when the dealer or factory explains the price to repair is greater than the price of the product. This process adds to our e-waste problem in landfills. This bill does not aim to make changes to proprietary information. That's a very important part of it, as that should remain protected. This is a bill about the rights of consumers. I also would like to note that Consumers Report, an independent nonprofit member organization, has submitted testimony in support of this bill. I thank the committee for its time.
Thank you, Representative Ziegler. Any questions from members of the committee? Representative Stekes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Forgive me for being really confused. So we have this bill with a lot of language in it. We were just told from the senator that we basically should disregard all the language in this bill and come up with something else. The senator is questioning whether there's a problem or not. He actually asked us, is there a problem? And you just said we need to look into this problem. Could you be more specific? What are you identifying specifically as a problem?
I think I just mentioned what the problems were.
Could you
And
repeat it then? I must have missed it.
Yeah. The problem is that if you have to make a repair and you have to go through the dealer, often that can be very costly and it's a time delay. If there are people available to fix it in a closer range, it doesn't affect the warranty, that decreases the time. I think what the senator is saying is that there is a problem, but this bill, we want to look at the scope of the problem. We want more input from stakeholders. We want to see who's affected by it. And so, again, he's not saying there's not a problem. He's saying let's define the problem more. Most of the model bills in the 22 states going forward are started as concept bills. It's up to the legislature and this committee to define and from hearing the public testimony, to define more what the state should do in regards to that, to protect consumer rights. This started from Apple and its phones because of how they designed them. And when they started to design the much slimmer phone that we all love, They made them far more complex. I can't find my phone right now. God, I hate being 70 years old. We forget things periodically. That started, and then also farmers and anybody operating heavy equipment in rural areas started to complain because it took them time and effort and money to get their equipment fixed. Previously, the equipment was not as sophisticated as it is today, and sophistication comes with, when I was working in the woods, there were 2 machines, and the rest of us were just loggers and skidder drivers. I worked for Georgia Pacific. Now, it's all automated machines, very few of individual loggers. That's a very complex machine. It's the stress on the machines, both farming and logging in particular, since we're talking about these 2 entities, you know, they're quite hard. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I hope I did.
Thank you. Any
Can
other
I just follow up with that, please?
follow-up, Representative Steckes?
A little thick-headed. Too many skill saws and nail guns and that sort of stuff, probably. So the problem is, as we all know, machines break down. And what you're saying is they're not able to be fixed fast enough under current conditions. Am I following that?
Somewhat.
Okay.
They're not.
And if
if
that,
you-
I
if you're
guess if
saying that
that's
they're
the
not to be
case,
fixed
how?
in the time,
I'm sorry?
Are we now looking at, why aren't they being able to be fixed in a timely fashion? That's the question. Is it because of dealers not allowing third parties to be involved in that? Because they're worried about proprietary information? And this happened in regards to automobiles in California. So maybe I am answering your question when you talk about a timely fashion. It's the time issue in there is because of the fact you have to go through dealerships.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get what you're getting at. Thank you.
Right. Seeing no further questions. Thank you, Representative Siegler.
Thank you, Senator.
Any other co-sponsors that wish to testify? Senate President Jackson, always good to see you. To Alyssa right here.
I'm sorry.
Senator Herbig and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Innovation, Development, Economic Advancement, and Business Committee. My name is Troy Jackson. I serve as President of the Maine Senate and have the great honor representing Senate District 1, which is made up of the good people of Northern Worcester County. I'm here today to testify in support of LD 1977, an act to ensure a consumer's right to repair certain electronic products. This is a simple concept. If you own a product, you should have the right to repair it, yet more and more electronic products are sold with severe restrictions on the owner's ability to repair their device. This undermines the free market and hurts small businesses who have traditionally performed basic repairs at a reasonable price. Often, much less than the manufacturer, it renders these small businesses obsolete at the expense of the consumer. The customer. In a large rural state like Maine, traveling to an authorized dealer costs both time and money, depending on where you live, and that's before the repair even begins. This bill takes a balanced approach to protect your rights as consumers, promoting small business, and respecting manufacturers' trade secrets. It requires manufacturers of electronic equipment to make available the information and material needed to diagnose and repair problems. However, it also acknowledges the manufacturer's right to protect trade secrets and maintain a warranty with the buyer. LD 1977 also established steps to ensure owner protection. Independent businesses, prior to servicing a product, must notify the owner of the equipment that they are not the authorized repair provider, and that owner should review the warranty before proceeding. Several companies already respect our right to repair, including Lenovo and Dell. They make their repair manuals and products readily available. Mainers are known for their rugged individualism and Yankee ingenuity. We are also known for our pragmatism when it comes to unnecessary expense. This bill is about taking matters in your own hands and bringing your device to a local person you trust and getting the job done. Mainers reserve the right to repair the products they own, the right to support small business, and the right to create jobs in their community. That's why I support LD 1977, an act to ensure right to repair certain electronic products, and I hope you'll join me. So I just want to say the genesis of this bill, a lot of people in Aroostook County had approached both myself and Senator Carpenter about phones, laptops, things like that, and I think Representative Perry spoke to having to go to Portland, which is, I don't have an iPhone, but I hear from people all the time that talk about the challenge of that, and I know with the Droid, bring it to Presque Isle, they ship it out, you know, and I mean, we obviously live in a society now that having your phone with you is unfortunately a basic necessity. And so that really is what, you know, I heard from constituent-wise that, you know, seems to be a real problem. And in the drafting, I'm a little, I mean, I understand why people could be concerned about legislation like this, definitely. But, you know, the way that this bill is drafted, obviously by the revisor's office, if you look on the first page, on 3, it talks about digital electronic equipment. And digital electronic equipment means any product that depends for its functioning in whole or in part on digital electronics embedded in or attached to the product, but does not include a motor vehicle as defined by Title 29A. So when you go to that, 29A, motor vehicle means a self-propelled vehicle not operated exclusively on railroad tracks, but does not include a snowmobile, an all-terrain vehicle, or a motorized wheelchair. So, you know, I'm not a lawyer, but revisors drafted a bill that seems to have excluded motor vehicles, which includes forestry equipment and farm products and stuff like that. So that was never, you know, the intent or what constituents that I'd heard from with this bill. I mean, it's a simple fact that traveling to Portland to have somebody possibly change a screen or so that's the issue is, you know, where do you draw the line on what could be repaired by local dealers and things like that. Never was, you know, my understanding, and I'm sure, I mean, Senator Carpenter, you know, didn't think that, you know, by the revisor's drafting, we were going down a completely different road. So, I mean, I've actually had Frank Martins here in the previous generation of this committee, business, talking about franchise agreements and stuff like that, understand the challenge of that. This is, you know, for me, why, you know, I worked on it with him and signed on to it about electronic. Now, obviously, that's going to cause a whole bunch of people from Apple and all those things to be upset. I mean, it's still going to be controversial, and I get that. But in the society that we're in today, not being able to have access to your smartphone or your laptop or tablet in a, you know, relatively timely manner is a problem. And I think it's something that, you know, we at least should look at. For my part, I mean, I tell the people in the room, I mean, I laid it all out. You know, if this any way, shape, or form got into motor vehicle as defined, then, you know, I would say the committee ought to kill it, because that was, I mean, I think Mike's, you know, concern, intent, and certainly mine. So, but I do think that we have, you know, serious problem with electronic devices in parts of the state. Possibly even in Portland. You know, maybe people in Portland don't get the service that they deserve either. I don't know, but I know the people that I represent are having a hard time with this problem. It was actually brought to us by constituents that, you know, we kind of share throughout Aroostook County, and I'm sure, you know, you probably all have heard people's frustrations with that to some extent. So that's why I'm in favor of the bill, why I worked with Senator Carpenter, and why I co-sponsored it, and you know, regardless of what the committee does, why I'll be supportive of somewhere along the line this people getting you know, some form of way to make this work better for them. So I'll take any questions.
Great, thank you, Senator Jackson. Questions from members of the committee? say thank you. That was pretty clarifying for me, actually. It was nice to have a very clear understanding of what the original intent was, the bill, and just since we have a lot of people here, I think sometimes as legislators we try to craft legislation to get at a very specific problem, and I always say that lawmaking is like casting a net. Sometimes you catch things in there that you don't intend, and it has consequences to people in the industry and causes a lot of alarm, and certainly none of us would ever want that. So thank you for clarifying that. So what I'm just to make sure, so what I'm understanding from you is that if we could identify a problem, or if we could have a better idea of what people are struggling with when it comes to their personal electronic devices, that would be more of what you would be looking at.
Well, I mean, that's, what the intent of the bill was brought,
Okay.
to, both of us, and like I said, I go by what the revisor's office knows of the statute, and, because it's not, like I said, I'm not a lawyer, but, to me, after having explained to me, more, how they drafted, I think they drafted it accurate, but I understand how it can be, confusing, and certainly people in the industry, never should take a chance, if you, so I can appreciate their concern, but that's absolutely not what the intent was.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions? Representative Crockett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it would be really helpful if we could get, if we can figure it out, a list of what products are affected here. I mean, obviously motor vehicles are out because a lot of times if the whole warranty issue, obviously that's one thing to address. But I know with the big companies, if there's nothing nearby, oftentimes they want you to mail it in order to get repairs and things like that. Well, depending on the size of whatever products we're talking about, that's not necessarily a viable option. And you're much better having it done locally if it's available. So if we could maybe narrow the scope of what the products are we're talking about, that would be helpful.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, I don't disagree with you at all. I mean, the reality, forestry equipment, my son owns a fellow buncher. You have Frank Myron's right there in Fort Kent. You have Nortrax outside, down to Holton. That, while it's still distance involved there, at least people can get there and get parts and things like that. But Portland is, and you're not going to mail a fellow buncher to Portland, so.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Representative Stekis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess one of the questions that sort of comes to mind, here I am, I'm reading over all these words that we're supposed to not even be paying attention to now, I guess, but it does expressly say excluding motor vehicle, but is a farm tractor, a lawnmower, a skidder, a fellow buncher, a motor vehicle?
According to the revisor's office, no. The title, like I said, Title 29A states what a motor vehicle is.
So this language would actually include those items?
No, it wouldn't. Excluding motor vehicle, which according to the revisor's office, 29A means that a fellow buncher or farm tractor is a motor vehicle. And this excludes motor vehicles.
All right, thank you.
I'm sure, I'm not sure.
Mr. I was going to say, I think, I'm sure our analyst, Mr. Seneft, will have a lot more information for us at the work session.
Yeah, well, like I said, just to reiterate on that, the revisor's office, tried to make it clear in their language terms that this was for electronic devices, not including motor vehicles, and forestry, farming, even obviously any other is not a motor vehicle according to 29A. So.
All right. Well, thank you for the information. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Take care. Appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. Any other co-sponsors that wish to testify? Seeing our other legislators. Welcome, Representative.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, Senator Herbig and distinguished members of the Innovation Development Economic Advancement and Business Committee. I'm Representative David McRae. I live up in Fort Fairfield in the center of the county, and I proudly represent the House District 148 in that county. I'm here in support of LD 1977, an act to ensure a consumer's right to repair certain electronic devices. I suspect there are quite a few people behind me that are kind of relieved to see the evolution of this bill right before their eyes, or devolution of that bill, because it, in my mind, when it was first brought to me by a constituent, it was explained as a way to allow cell phone and computer repairs such as replacement of screens, batteries, and other similar items, not to dig into the unbelievably technical parts of those electronic devices. I thought that was a good idea. He gave as an example some grandmother that received a cell phone that had been used by her grandson, and Grammy, I got to get a better one, and I'm going to give you my old one. But it's got a cracked screen, and she can't see very well through it. So if she could just bring that to my constituent Mike, and he could put a screen in that for $40, that would be great. But he can't, okay? So that was, I'm all in, okay? That's what brought me into this. I had breakfast this morning with Senator Carpenter, and we both were going, oh my God, how did this get so big and so broad, okay? And we probably should have known that it was going to get that broad, but I don't think the genesis of it really didn't even suggest that it was going to do that with us. I'm more thinking of the kinds of things like a printer that goes bad, where there's a thing in there that aligns something that's a little bit like a timing gear in a vehicle, and my computer guy says, Dave, throw that away. We can get another one just like it for less than I can repair it for, which is like, really, okay? Or just before it broke, I bought ink, a colored cartridge and a black cartridge. And there's about $60 worth of ink. So I thought, well, if I'm going to throw this thing away, I'm at least going to get my cartridges. So I bought another of the same kind of printer that I thought I could put those cartridges in and at least retrieve that. Oh, he says, oh, no. These have been installed in another computer, so you might as well throw them away because you cannot use them ever again unless you can put them in the original computer. That didn't set well, only because I bought the printer, I bought the ink. Those kinds of things are what I viewed this bill to be. I also think, now we're going to go into the motor vehicle a little bit here, and I don't want to expand this back to motor vehicles. But, like for example, changing the starter on a vehicle, changing the starter on a tractor that may have to be down right during harvest in Aroostook County for 2 days until they either can get a mechanic there that is factory trained or to get the part there. To me, that's kind of nuts. Okay, now if it's a part thing, it's a part thing. But if you can't change your own starter on the tractor, it's almost to the point where you can't change the battery on a tractor, or tighten a belt, okay, tightening a drive belt or something like that. One of the things is geographic isolation, and that can be with motor vehicles, but it also has everything to do with small personal devices, cell phones, laptops, iPads, etc. I was talking with someone recently that said they live fairly near Portland, and they said, "Oh, it's a pain because I have to go clear inside the mall to get service." And I'm thinking Portland's only 300 miles from my house, okay, and then when you get there, you have to make an appointment, and it's going to be for the next day, and you can't necessarily call ahead and get the appointment. So those are real nuisances, and I think somewhere in all of what we've heard talked about here, there is a solution. I apologize if I've been a part of making this expand to the point where people are going to throw things at me from the back. But I also think that in a lot of cases, it's a matter of let's make this be a factory-trained dealer repair so that we can get the $130 an hour repair fees, et cetera, and all of that, rather than having Mike up in Fort Fairfield put in a computer screen or a laptop screen or what have you. So that's, and there's a little bit of me, if I buy it, I own it. There's a little bit of that in there, and I understand there's proprietary material in there that I don't have any business being in there, but I still bought the phone, okay? And I know there's stuff in there that says I don't have the ability to get in there, and I don't want it. But there is something there that makes it somewhat patently unfair. So with that, I do support the bill as it seems to be evolving, and maybe we can put something together that will really focus on the kinds of things that the bill says in the title, right to repair certain electronic devices. If we can do that, I think it'll be a success for all of us. I think the people of Maine will appreciate it, and not just, not just that repair guy, but everybody. So with that, I'll try to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative. Any questions from members of the committee? Representative Stetkes.
There we go. Thank you.
Doing my part. So it sounds like with your testimony, as this has evolved, or however, so at this point, or devolved, at this point, we are only talking about electronic devices.
I'm not the sponsor of the bill, but that would satisfy the part that got me involved in this. So I think if that's where we go, as I just said, I think that would be a great service to an awful lot of people on something that need not be this complex.
Follow-up, Representative Stetkes.
Okay, so if we can get to that point where it's only electronic devices, and of course you just mentioned, I think, one particular item, say a cell phone.
Cell phone.
Again, I've got, these are what we're not supposed to consider. We're supposed to erase all this. I'm just trying to, where are we going to end up? I guess we're going to look into this, but if under the cell phone situation, let's say 80 or 90% of the perceived problem that we don't know is a problem isn't a problem, do we just walk away from this?
Well, I guess, in my opinion, okay, I don't want to fight for the right on motor vehicles and stuff like that. That went way beyond what I thought I was getting involved in. I firmly believe, as I just said, that everybody in this room would be better served if we could take it to Mike and have him put a new laptop screen in or something like that. I don't want him in doing real technical stuff because he's not going to be factory trained on a particular device. But I got a feeling, truth be known, I'm not the brightest guy in the world, but I think in an hour you could probably train me to change the screen on your cell phone. And I could do it proficiently, but you sure couldn't get me in there spot fixing some of the electronics in this thing, of course not.
Representative Higgins.
Thank you. Rather than taking it to Mike, maybe we should take it to Sam, who's back here, who is our analyst. It seems that there's a quite different direction here, needs a lot of language to bring it back to what the intent was. We're certainly not going to write that language ourselves sitting around here. So when we come back to work session, I think it would make sense to have something that's captured what I think you talked about, what the President of the Senate talked about, and probably relieve a lot of angst of people here. And I won't be the one fixing my screen, no matter what. But anyway, it would be much easier for me if I didn't have to drive 150 miles to do it as well. So I don't know if it seems to me that might be where we need to go, or maybe back to Revisor's office. I don't know, Madam Chair, what direction, but obviously we need something quite different what we have for the work session.
I'd say a whole lot different, yeah.
For point of clarification, the Mike I was speaking of was not the good senator. Mike was the constituent that brought this to me.
Mike Carpenter doesn't fix
No, and I don't.
cell phone screens.
I know him well enough to know I don't think we want him to.
Okay.
Very good.
Very good.
Thank
you,
much.
Representative,
We
for
really
joining us
appreciate
today.
your
Thanks
time.
for the information.
Thank you, Chris.
Sure. All right. Anyway, I don't see any other legislators in the room. Anybody that wishes to testify in favor of LD 1977? Come on down. Welcome.
Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, Senator Herbig and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Anya Fetcher, and I am the State Director at Environment Maine. Environment Maine is a nonpartisan, citizen-based environmental advocacy organization. We represent thousands of members across the state who share our belief that there is something special about Maine, something that's worth protecting. I'm speaking today in support of LD 1977, or Right to Repair, because we can and should reduce waste by making it easier to repair our own stuff. Let me share a few facts that I feel really underscore the problem and the absurdity of continuing to allow the barriers to repair. E-waste is a growing concern. A UN coalition issued a report last year finding that e-waste is the fastest growing waste stream in the world. The EPA estimated that in 2014, approximately 416,000 mobile phones were disposed or gotten rid of each day in this country. If you break that down per capita, it would mean that Mainers dispose or get rid of over 1,700 cell phones every day. It's estimated that 14% of climate pollution will be related to internet-connected technology over the next 20 years. This is in part because of the extreme resource taxing nature of extraction. Extraction and manufacturing is 80% of a cell phone's climate impact. Companies benefit when we throw out our devices and have to buy new ones, but this throwaway culture is causing havoc for our environment. Producing less stuff, especially electronics, is critical for a livable planet. Now let me tell you why that matters here in Maine. About 2 years ago, a whole set of Mainers downloaded the latest Apple iOS update and soon found their phone was running very slowly. Most probably figured it was just getting old and it was time, once again, for an upgrade, something many of them could not afford. Turns out that the software update Apple created included performance controls, which degraded the performance of iPhones containing older and worn-out batteries. After issuing a formal apology, Apple announced that the problem would be solved by replacing the device's battery and offered a discount for the replacements. But here's the problem. There is only one Apple store in the entire state of Maine. One. Meaning anyone living outside of the greater Portland area had a very difficult time accessing that discounted battery. It was a mess. The goal of Right to Repair is to remove the most common barrier to reuse and repair, which is the lack of access to repair information, software, and spare parts. LD 1977 would allow independent shops to buy those batteries from Apple and have the service information and access to diagnostic information needed to fix these products. By far the easiest, cheapest way to address our e-waste problems is to keep these products in use when we can. And there are numerous people in our communities who are glad to do the work. We are only asking for a little help to solve this problem for ourselves, with the ingenuity and pluck of Mainers. Frankly, there isn't a good reason why we shouldn't be allowed to fix our own stuff. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this important legislation.
Thank you, Ms. Fletcher. Questions from members of the committee? Representative Moriarty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you've heard, having been present here this afternoon, the real question is the scope of the bill and the intent of the sponsors. My sense is that we'd all be astonished to find out how many things we own that contain digital electronic equipment and/or embedded software. I assume that applies to microwaves, televisions, all sorts of things. Would you agree they're part of the e-waste disposal problem?
I would agree that they're likely. I can't say for sure specifically what products are contributing to it and what are not. But yes, I mean, any sort of electronics that are being thrown away instead of, if they could have been repaired and then bought something new, not only is it adding to the e-waste, but also the extraction of materials needed to then make those would contribute to the environmental problem.
Okay, I admit this is a totally unfair question, but if we just focused on cell phones and left everything else with embedded software and digital electronics free and clear of the scope of the bill, have we gone far enough?
In my opinion, no. But I think that it would be an important step in the right direction, considering, as I said, the number of cell phones that the U.S., just in the U.S., that people throw out every day is 416,000. Like, that is a very large number. So I think it would be an important step. I do believe that it's important to move into, I'm not writing the legislation and everything, that's not my expertise. Ideally, I would advocate for it to move to more motor vehicles, to farm equipment and whatnot. You know, there are companies such as John Deere, they're a great company, and farmers really appreciate their products, but there are products that they have that if there is a repair, there is a lock on it, and they're not even able to diagnose the problem without calling up John Deere to come out. So I think that that is another area that we would advocate to be in there, but I think that the cell phones is a really good start.
Any other questions? No? Thank you very much for joining us
Thank
today.
you.
Yeah. Anyone else that wishes to testify in favor of LD 1977?
Hi, my name is Louis Rossman with Rossman Repair. I run a repair shop in New York City. Just want to say thank you very much for giving us the time to talk about this bill. Usually when I travel around the country and I discuss it, I go over the opposition arguments because they're usually false or made up. Here, I think a part of my job is going to be explaining how some of the bill is written and why it's written the way it is, because there appears to be some confusion regarding that. So the first thing I want to do is describe the specific scope of the problem and why it is at a point where people with issues with their cell phone are showing up in front of legislative committees. Let me talk a little about how devices were serviced 50 years ago and contrast that to now. So if you had, let's say, an appliance, a receiver, or anything like that 60 years ago, and you wanted to fix it, you could open it up, and it would have documentation inside that said how it was all put together. Now we don't have that. If you wanted to buy a part to fix that thing that you paid $1,000 or $2,000 for, you could call up the company, and even if they didn't have the part still in stock, they would direct you to somebody who has it. Let's fast forward to 2018. So with that laptop you have over there, if something goes wrong with it, I can buy a chip online for $5, replace it, and you're back in business. Your data's there, all your software's there, and you're good. With new machines, what happens is Apple has done something, and many other companies are starting to do this. They change that chip so it speaks on a different address so that I can't use last year's chip. Now, if I contact Apple, they won't sell it to me. If I become an Apple authorized service provider, they still won't sell it to me. If I go to the company that makes that chip, they will say, we are not allowed to sell that to anybody but Apple. And you know what happens when you go to Apple? They say, it'll be $1,500 to fix that board, but we're going to replace it with another one, so not only is it $1,500, but all your data is gone. So if you drive 4 hours, which is what you have to do here, because there's one Apple store in Maine that I can find, you are going to drive there, you're going to spend $1,500 for a repair that you could have spent $200 for, and all of your information is gone. This is why when lobbyists say this bill is a solution in search of a problem, I think that's disingenuous. Because if that lobbyist who's reading off of a script has their script stuck inside that machine, is not turning on because a $5 chip is not available, I'm certain they would see that as a problem. Now, the next thing that comes up is dangers. It is dangerous to have unauthorized people work on these products. One of my employees is a mechanic. He worked as a mechanic for about 25 years, and he showed me an AutoZone commercial that came out last year. It's called I Did It. And in the commercial, you have 4 different families working on a car, and it's implied that they're working on this car for the first time. The one that struck me the most is seeing this mom-daughter duo, which the girl is like probably 14 years old, and she's helping her mom lift the car up onto a jack so that they could change the brake pads, the part that allows this 4,000-pound hunk of metal to stop. We are okay doing that because we are a nation that takes pride in self-sufficiency. We take pride in our ability to fix problems and service our own personal property. Yet here we are, where you're going to hear arguments where people are going to read from a script and tell you that replacing this little 3-volt battery inside of your phone is so dangerous that you shouldn't do it. It doesn't make any sense. The problem here is that the culture has changed drastically. Because 70 years ago, even the greediest of companies would never do this, whereas today, many eco-friendly companies that hide inside this progressive blanket and pretend to care about the world are taking these types of actions just so that they can make a little bit extra money, just so that you buy a new one so that their stock price goes up every week. That is the problem that we face here. And the culture has changed, but the law hasn't caught up with it. The last example that I will give, because I think it's a good one, if you unplug that machine, it'll work because there's a chip that reads the battery. With the many machines they make now, if that chip dies and I try to replace it, it has no firmware on it. So I have to find a machine that I can read that firmware from. If I tried to read the firmware from a known good machine's chip, it will die. It will erase itself. Like when Jack Bauer in the TV series 24 would be chasing a terrorist, and then he'd go, "Where's the bomb? Where's the bomb?" And then the terrorist would eat a cyanide pill because he'd rather die than let Jack know where the bomb is. Imagine if you tried to hook up jumper cables from your car to his car outside, and the original car died just because you tried to fix it. Now, when it comes to scope and exclusions, there are certain exclusions that were written into the bill because, to be honest with you, people didn't feel like fighting lobbying groups of every single industry. So this is a bill that's regarding digital right to repair. This is an issue that affects everybody. Just 2 months ago, there was an article in the New York Times about how a Marine Corps officer was asking one of their subordinates, "Why can't we do this training mission? Because the generator doesn't work." "Why doesn't it work?" "Because I can't get parts to fix it." This is about more than a cell phone or a tractor. This is affecting everything in this country nowadays. Now, the reason that there are certain exclusions is because we may be okay going up against the lobbyists in the cell phone industry. We don't want to go up against lobbyists in, let's say, the medical industry in that state. So in Boston, they amended the bill to say this affects digital electronics, blah, 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 but we are going to make an exclusion for medical devices because we don't want to go into the rabbit hole of liability and everything if something happens. But this is an issue in the medical industry because in the medical industry, there are hospitals where there's $100,000 to $200,000 machines. They need a $200 power supply. They wind up just forcing the hospital to replace it and pay $100,000, which, by the way, is why our hospital bill has been going up over the past 20 to 30 years. This is an issue that affects everybody. Now, when it comes to tractors, because I heard it mentioned, does this affect automobiles? Does this affect tractors? What you should know is that in Nebraska, the Nebraska Farm Bureau voted 176 to 1 in favor of supporting right to repair legislation. So whether or not this affects farms, you should know that A, farmers want a bill like this, B, they've been lobbying for it in Nebraska and Tennessee for years, and C, the Nebraska Farm Bureau is all standing behind you if you choose to sign this legislation. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I'm more than happy to answer any concerns, and I'm here until tomorrow. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm not a lobbyist either, but I'm good at playing pretend. So.
Questions from any committee members? Representative
Yes,
Handy.
Thank you for coming, and your perspective is very interesting. And my question is around the impact on small repair businesses, either existing ones or ones that would like to expand. Could you kind of...
Absolutely. So for me, if this bill doesn't pass, I will still be able to do my job because I've been in this business for 12 years and I have a lot of contacts. For new people who want to enter the business, they are the people who are truly being hurt by these practices. That chip that I said I can't get, I now can get. And I can't say how I can get it for obvious reasons, but I have the access to it. People who don't have experience can't, which means that if you have that problem in Maine, there's probably nobody in Maine that can get that chip and fix it. If this bill is passed, somebody in Maine will be able to buy that chip for $10 to $15 and fix your device and maintain your data. The reason that this is important to me and the reason that I travel as often as I do rather than work on my own company and 14 employees is because I want people to be able to follow on the path that I followed. I used to be poor, I was broke, and this is the industry that allowed me to satisfy over 30,000 customers, make a name for myself, and hire 13 people away from jobs that previously paid the minimum wage that they now make 2 to 4 times as much. So this has great impact on small businesses, and it will bring a lot of tax revenue to your state.
Sure. Any other questions from members of the committee? Yes, Representative Stetkis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't listen nearly as fast as you talk. I didn't catch your name, I'm sorry.
My name is Lewis, and every other state that I testify in, they have that timer set to 2 or 3 minutes, so I've gotten into this bad habit of talking too quickly. I appreciate you not using it, by the way. Thank you.
Any other, sorry, go ahead.
So Louis, one of the things that's been mentioned previously is the right to repair movement.
Yes.
And where you're traveling from state to state to state, is this something that you're involved in?
I've been doing this for 5 years, yes.
So you're part of the right to repair movement or the right to repair organization?
Yes. It's not so much an organization as it is a group of independent repair shops that advocate and support for this legislation.
So what do you, I guess this group of independent repair shops, do you call yourself something? Are you an organization?
Not really. We just call ourselves
or
independent repair. In Nebraska, someone said repair family, but that kind of got made fun of by the senators up there, so I try to avoid using it. No, sorry, Michael. But yeah, it's just a group of independent repair shops that we all deal with the exact same thing. If I want to fix one of your machines, I have to go to some kind of shady-looking Russian website, give them my credit card information, hope that it doesn't get used in a way that it shouldn't, and get a document that I probably shouldn't have access to. If I want to buy parts to fix that machine, that chip that I just told you about, I can't tell you who supplies me that chip, because if I do, they'll get in trouble. but I need to be able to get supplied that chip in order to do my job. And I have everybody from normal customers to NYU students to members of the New York City District Attorney's Office that show up at my store to try to get me to recover data for devices that they need fixed. It's important. And that's where I'm at.
Follow-up, Representative
That was a
Tekis.
rabbit hole. Thank you.
Sure.
So you gotta be careful. I guess I'm just trying to figure out where, we've got several pages of legislation here that we're not supposed to pay attention to now. You've testified in other states. Is this, have you looked at this
I've
legislation?
looked at that. I don't have that memorized because it changes from state to
But
state.
is it similar to other
That is-
legislation that you testified in favor to in other states?
That is very similar to legislation I've seen in other states. In Boston, the only issue they had was exception with medical devices. I did not see an exception for medical devices in this bill, but that looks like a 90% copy and paste of bills that have favorable support in other states. I testified in Washington to a very favorable array of senators, and they all were happy with the bill as it was.
And those bills included more than just electronic devices?
They included electronic devices the same way that this does. The issue is not that it includes more than electronic devices, because this bill only refers to electronic devices. The problem is that electronic devices are in everything. So if you want to fix a John Deere tractor that costs almost $1 million, the issue that farmers in Nebraska are having is that if you want to fix it, you can actually fix the issue you have, but you need to have someone come out from the dealership with a little computer and hook up to it and say, okay, it's been fixed now it can work again. Because when it fails, they're not able to use it again immediately. So once they replace whatever fuse or whatever it is that broke, I don't use tractors, I'm not a farmer, the way it was explained to me is once they've actually fixed it, it won't work until someone from the dealer shows up and plugs in a machine. So it's not about fixing the tractor, it's about the fact that electronics are inside just about everything nowadays. So it applies to just about everything. So if you have a machine in a hospital, we're not talking about fixing medical equipment, but there's a power supply that powers that medical equipment, and that will fail, and that is something that can be fixed for $200 rather than replacing the whole thing for $100,000. So it's not so much about what devices does this apply to, so much as it is that electronics aren't everything nowadays. They're being included in everything nowadays. And if this is what's going to happen on the small scale with cell phones and laptops, it's going to get only worse and worse as this expands outwards. I didn't even know until 2 months ago when I saw that New York Times article that this affected people in the Marine Corps. I was astounded. I had no idea that, for lack of a better way to put it, that they had the cojones to tell the Marines, you can't fix the generators that we sold you.
Just to clarify, there was a lot there. So what you're saying, with your experience with this legislation that is very much like legislation in other states that you testified in, it is justified that these folks with farm tractors and skidders and everything else, in your experience, this applies to what they're concerned about as well.
This adopted this legislation. And the reasons for that is it mandates proprietary information being given to anyone without any certification or training and without any accountability protections. And so it puts a lot of things at risk. The first is the customer's data. We're not talking about brake jobs on a car here. We're talking about devices that are connected to the internet that contain the consumer's data, the relationships with other people in the world. So everybody's data can be put at risk when these devices are accessed. The safety risk that we've heard a little bit about that. Untrained people getting into the mechanics of these devices can be a dangerous exercise. And it's not something you want people to do that aren't trained to do it. It undermines the business relationship of the people who are certified. And a lot of people in this room are certified to fix these devices. And those are the people that have taken the time and expense to do that. And this bill would overcome that by giving the same information and parts to people who have not gone through that training, and thereby setting up this imbalance, an unfair balance between people who are authorized and people who are not authorized to do these repairs. And I don't think this really recognizes the range of repairs and refurbishment options that are available today. When you get your a phone or any other device, you have a lot of options now with and we can talk more about that. And that leads into the e-waste discussion. Phones were part of the e-waste bill in Maine. Maine has a very strong e-waste program, but the phones were taken out of that because of these other options for recycling, refurbishment, repair that are in the system. And the phones weren't showing up in that e-waste system. So, as I said, more than 20 states have already reviewed this legislation, and no bills have passed. A lot of it's because it raises a lot of these issues and creates more questions than it solves. So for these reasons, we're asking you not to pass this bill. And if you want to look more into how to make certified repair more accessible in the state of Maine, or is there a problem for accessing certified repair shops in Maine, that's something you can explore. But this bill really gets ahead of that, and it raises a lot of security problems that we would be very concerned about if you pass this bill.
All right, great. Thank you, Mr. Ferdinand. Any questions from members of the committee? Representative Austin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bill, in the light of what you just said, would it be an untold task to figure out what could actually be allowed to be worked on?
Right.
Versus.
Right. I think you're going to hear, because we
your-
heard a lot about the screens and things like that.
Well, and the
Yeah.
proprietary and the,
Right.
and the,
Right. I think you will hear that the screen issue is that you're hearing anecdotes from before. I don't think that is much of an issue today as it was. You can get your screen repaired and not have that warranty issue as much. So I think that's a good question for the people who are going to come behind me. The batteries, lithium batteries do present hazardous chemical and I don't want to say explosion, but heat and issues. They're hazardous materials. So you have to be careful with them. And opening a phone isn't something you just do readily. And so I think you have to be careful about which types of repairs that you want to allow just anybody to do without any training or certification.
Very good. Yeah, follow up, Representative Austin.
and just repeat again, nobody, to your knowledge, has accepted this not even California?
No.
Not even California?
Not even California. No, and you looked at this bill is on their website. It's the same bill. I mean, they're going around the country with the same bill, so.
Any other questions from members of the committee? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Ferdinand, for being here. Anyone else who wishes to testify in opposition to LD 1977? Welcome.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Lisa McCabe, and I'm with CTIA, which is a trade association for the wireless communications industry. We believe the marketplace already provides a wide range of consumer options when it comes to repair. We just heard someone testify that he took his phone somewhere else to be repaired other than Apple. So the marketplace is working. Manufacturers have relationships with authorized repair. And these repair providers, which are oftentimes local small businesses, have received appropriate training to make sure that those repairs will be done properly and safely. Manufacturers value consumer brand loyalty and want to make sure that that phone works throughout the life of the product. And they want to maintain that high quality of their product. So the authorized repair ensures that the high quality of that product remains and that the repairs are done to the manufacturer's standards. In addition to authorized repair, manufacturers also offer retail where consumers can, walk in. They have mail-in options, which was mentioned. And also insurance providers now offer options for repair for consumers. And in some cases, insurance providers are looking toward going to the consumer themselves, traveling to the consumer to perform that repair. Also, recently, to address some of the changes in the repair marketplace, CTIA, our association, worked with industry stakeholders to launch a program that educates and tests repair technicians based on industry-recognized standards. And it certifies technicians who meet the highest standards for service quality and technical skill. Today, consumers can avail themselves of independent repair should they choose so. But you have to remember that the manufacturer does not assure the guarantee the quality of those repairs. And there are unintended consequences, which was mentioned, to having independent repair. If you have a repair provided all of the technical information that is mentioned in this bill without the specific training on the assembly and reassembly deassembly and reassembly of the device that could unintentionally cause problems, such as, even in the case of, you could have performance problems with an antenna, where the antenna isn't worked properly because something was misaligned. There's no manufacturer that would void a warranty for having a screen replaced by an independent provider.
Okay, thank you, Ms. McCabe. Questions from members? Representative Perry.
Thank you. Thanks for being here today. So we've heard not necessary, but I'm not there yet that it's not necessary, that there could be some improvements. I actually did have an Apple phone where I live in Bangor, I broke the screen, and I couldn't wait a week or two till I could get down to Portland and pay $150 to have it repaired. I took it to a local guy. I think I spent $69, $79, and then later had a different problem, unrelated, and I would argue not caused by his screen repair. And when I went down to Apple, they said my warranty was voided. So, and when I hear of these chips that you can't get, it erases your data, makes me think that's a way to force everyone to pay for cloud services. And now they hold your data and it's lost, but we're the ones who can give it back to you. So if in fact a change has come where local people can replace it. Now, and my other option in Bangor is I could go to Best Buy. They're an authorized, but they mail it out. So now I don't have my device for several days, and they don't handle everything, so I still have to get down to Portland. And I'm lucky in Bangor, I've got the Best Buy there. People in Millinocket or Aroostook County might not have those options at all. So if they have come to the point where now they will accept a screen repair from an independent, maybe there's more avenues where this training could be available for independents, where parts could be available for more common areas, and maybe respect some of the other things they don't want independents doing and not voiding the warranty. But it does sound very concerning to me. This thing breaks down and we've got your data, it's gone, or that sort of thing. So I want to hear more about this bill as we work it.
All right, thank you, Representative Perry. Any other questions from members of the committee? Oh, seeing
I
none,
just
thank you.
also, may I say one more thing?
Sure.
Vermont has studied this issue, and they did a legal analysis of many of the concerns surrounding the importance of providing security for the data, as well as trade secrets evolved around the technology. So I think that's an important thing to note as well.
Thank you. Yep, thank you for joining us today. All right, anyone else that wishes to testify in opposition to LD 1977? Yep, so there's been a request, Sam, if you could get the Vermont report back to us for our work session, that would be appreciated. Thank you. Sure, yeah, thank you. Yep. Welcome.
Thank you. I have to admit, I'm confused coming up here at this point.
If you could just give us your name and where you're from, that would be great. Sure.
Deborah Delp, Yarmouth.
Great, thank you.
I run a boatyard, Yankee Marine and Boatyard in Yarmouth. And the way this is written includes a lot of products we sell. So, and I don't know how this is going to end up, but anyway, so Senator Herbig, Representative Daughtry, and distinguished members of the committee. Our company's 55 years old. I employ 23 people, and I really appreciate you hearing from me. So to understand my perspective, I need to share about my company. And my company was built nights and weekends by my dad over many years. And while he worked in other business, and integrity and relationships have been the foundation upon which all of our business decisions are made. We at Yankee Marina care deeply about providing the best technical expertise available to our customers because we care about customers. So we sell outboards. We service outboards, generators, many products that have electronics in them. So the way you have written this, or whoever wrote it, it seemed to be up in the air on that. It covers a lot of what I do. Well, my understanding is that the reason, before I attended here, this morning, is the reason for this LD 1977 is because you believe that it's going to make service ultimately more affordable, which is what one of the originators said. I believe ultimately if it's written the way it is and passed, it'll be more expensive, will reduce the quality, and will hurt small business. I do not agree at all that this is going to help small business. While yes, this bill will provide the do-it-yourselfers with information that helps them fix their own devices, it will also allow businesses to provide services to customers when they don't actually have the training, the way this is written. I can assure you that your small business constituents have worked hard to earn those dealerships that you guys have been talking about. We've worked hard to build strong reputations by providing service by a crew that are well-trained with the latest technology, a crew that is committed, invested, and take pride in their work. Everything I believe that as a legislature you want for the reputation of Maine businesses. This bill would work against those companies, against these employees, and all their hard work. Please understand that when a manufacturer of the products we sell, they've spent years and lots of money on R&D, and their goal is to provide the best product available, and therefore they choose the best companies to represent those products and to service those products so that the consumer receives reliable and knowledgeable expertise in service that they deserve. There's a gentleman in our industry, and there are many, but there's one in particular. I'm kind of known. I don't let certain people in my yard. If they don't have integrity, they don't come in. And this guy is absolutely terrible. And he can get that chip that gentleman talked about. He can get that computer. He'll steal the information. And he'll service people, and he's not a good guy. And I don't let him on any of my boats. I don't let him walk into my yard. You've got to safeguard people. Under LD 1977, anyone can say they have knowledge and ability to fix almost anything, yet they will not have the training. Ultimately, the consumer will spend more money for inferior service, which typically leads to additional money spent and a bad end product. We've all been there. It even states in the bill as written that a product can be repaired with like an aftermarket part, and the warranty should be maintained. I have a Honda, it's got 209,000, I'm going for 350, and I use Honda parts. I don't allow anything else because I know what happens when a Napa part's used. I've seen it over and over again. I know that this legislature cares about my crew. I know that you want what's best for my crew and for my business to flourish. This will not do it. Lastly, I have customers that come to us from all over New England, in fact, all over the world. My largest vessel is worth $6 million, and it comes from Boston. My next one is worth millions, and it comes from New Hampshire. Customers come from far away because Maine has a reputation for quality and integrity in the boating industry. Please don't allow LD 1977 to take away the reputation of quality workmanship that we have all worked so hard to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for joining us today, Ms. Delp. Questions from members of the committee? Senator Guerin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think you brought up a good point on the investment that your family has made in this and the investment of research and development for the companies. Are you an authorized dealer?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And do you pay a fee to be an authorized dealer?
For many, yeah. For depending, but we have to send them. If we don't pay a yearly fee, we have to send them to school every year. So I'm training my guys. I'm paying for that school sometimes. Sometimes I'm just paying for flight, but it is a huge investment. And according to this bill, a customer, an end user could get all these emails. I get so many emails. I can't imagine a consumer wanting to get all the emails I get, like on a gyro that we sell and service. So yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Absolutely. The mics are not.
I'm bringing my hammer next week.
We have a gavel if you want to try.
That'll work. I guess just a quick question. We got a list of things that one of the sponsors actually said we need to specifically exclude from the bill. I do not believe I saw boats or motorboats in there. would you know, would boats or motorboats be excluded from motor vehicle? When they're referring to motor vehicles are not excluded, would you feel that you would be?
With all due respect, I wouldn't even dare suggest I'd know after what I've heard here today.
I guess you and
with-
I are in the same boat.
Truly, respectfully, I say that.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone else wishing to testify in opposition? Oh, sorry. Feel free to jump right up and line up as well.
That is where candle laughter comes from.
Representative Daughtry, distinguished members of the Innovation, Development, Economic Advancement, and Business Committee. I am Megan Diver, Senior Government Relations Specialist at the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, a statewide business association representing both large and small businesses across the state. The Chamber supports policies and priorities that help Maine businesses prosper and our economy flourish to make Maine as competitive as possible. I am not going to read my testimony because there are a lot of people behind me that are much more familiar with the details of this. I will say the Chamber's concerns are about the complexities of the products in question. We have privacy and security concerns as well as business concerns. A lot of these businesses have gone through trainings to become certified, and so from a fairness aspect, they've gone through these trainings, and there are many uncertified companies that haven't. I will also say that someone before me brought up the medical devices. Someone from IDEX called yesterday very concerned. To quote him, it's a matter of life or death, and I assume that's in not just the animal field, but also in the human world, that they code and refragment their machines on a daily basis, and it would be hard for them to make sure that everybody had all of the up-to-date information on a daily basis. So that is all I will say, just because there's a lot of people behind me that have more expertise.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Diver. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I was going to say if... Okay.
All right.
Welcome.
One second. Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Catherine Gunter, and I'm the Director of State Government Affairs for the Entertainment Software Association, and I'm here today to respectfully oppose LD 1977. ESA is the trade association that represents companies that publish computer and video games for an assortment of consumer devices, which include game consoles. The makers of all three consoles, Microsoft, Nintendo, and Sony, are members of ESA. We recognize that this is an important public policy issue, and we appreciate the opportunity to share the video game industry's perspective. In advance of the testimony, here is my formal letter. I would like to emphasize that game console makers are committed to providing consumers with repairs that are affordable, quick, and secure. Frankly, our industry doesn't make any money off of a broken console. Therefore, we offer a variety of options if your device needs to be repaired. Additionally, all of three of our companies that make these consoles offer after-warranty repairs just to maintain that their goods are in good working order. Video game publishers rely upon our secure media environments of the game console to safeguard work from piracy and to help prevent piracy. Video game software and hardware have security features that are built into them, known as technical protection measures, or essentially a digital lock. These prevent the play of unauthorized games. Put simply, if you play a game that is not authorized on a game console, the firmware will pick up that it is bootlegged and it will not play that copy. So it only plays legitimate copies. These digital locks really help to create our secure media platform. We believe that sharing our hardware schematics, sensitive diagnostic information, tools, and security-related reset codes with unvetted third parties would compromise the security of our entire platform, and this would harm both console makers and game publishers. As once the console's modified and the locks are disabled, any number of illegally copied games can be played, making the threat of piracy exponential.
Finally, I just want to note that any state effort to make unlocking these tools available to unauthorized repair shops is at odds with federal law. The digital locks are obviously necessary and directly related to combating piracy. So in 2018, the U.S. Copyright Office said there's no evidence to support the inclusion of consoles under a general right to repair rule. And the latest Digital Millennium Copyright Act actually made it illegal to traffic tools that can crack the digital locks. So in closing, I just want to say that the vitality and the success of the game console business is dependent upon a trustworthy platform. And if the platform is compromised, which we think it would be, if right to repair forced console makers to open up our firmware, it could really hurt consumers, publishers, and game consoles. Thank you so much for allowing me the time to testify.
Thank you, Ms. Gunter. Do we have any questions from the committee? Representative Steckes?
So far.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could you, prior to having these being able to put these locks into the games, can you give us a rough idea of the cost to business that pirating, that these things stopped, the cost of the pirating?
Sure, I don't have a number, but I can speak anecdotally. For us, as soon as the console comes out, people start to immediately try to crack it so they can start playing games. The PS4 has been broken into, and Sony does a number of software updates to kind of prevent that circumvention. The same has happened with the new Nintendo Switch. It's only been out for about 3 years. So I can't speak to an exact number, but if the technical protection lock information is distributed onto social media, there's detrimental costs because then anybody can take that, put it in a Reddit stream, and that could lead to millions and millions of dollars worth of, dollars lost for companies. The video game industry is a $43.6 billion industry just in the U.S.
Thank you.
Hopefully that helps.
Any other questions? I actually have a quick one.
Yeah.
I was listening to NPR last night, and they were talking with a young father, I think, in Australia, who had a child with disabilities, and he created his own custom console controller for her to be able to play the games. Would that also void the warranty as a aftermarket product, or?
I don't actually know the answer to that question. I don't think that it would because it's creating something new, so you would have its own new platform, but I can look into that and get back to you.
Yeah, it was just an interesting,
Yeah.
it's not something I thought of, a controller where it's not actually, pirating the game. It's still
Yeah.
working with the correct console, but it's like an accessory kind of thing.
Yeah, I think
So-
I'm not sure about accessories. I know some of the other parts within the game console, such as the fan. The fan speaks to the firmware, so if it's put in incorrectly, it can melt down the console.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure about controllers, but I can look into that and get back to you.
That'd be great. It was just
Yeah.
something that come up that I never thought of. So thank you, Ms. Gunter. Do we have anyone else who'd like to testify in opposition or any other questions from the committee? Yeah. I think. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you for having us here and for talking about this. Chairwoman Harburg, is it Chairwoman? Is it Doherty?
Daughtry,
close enough. Thank you. And members of the committee, for the opportunity to share my perspective on the important piece of legislation. My name's Rob Brown. I live in Randolph. I am a small business owner here locally. I'm also a certified tech. I have 2 of my certified technicians with me today. I'm extremely fortunate to be able to enjoy the outdoors through my business, Clark Marine, which owns and operates 3 locations across Maine, Manchester, and Monmouth, and Belgrade. We service between 2,800 and 3,000 boats, mostly locally, and engines each season, and we help to keep families out on the water, enjoying the precious time we have each year to use their boats. I offer this background because I can testify firsthand the effects of the so-called right to repair legislation would have on my business and my customers. Marine engines can become very serious liability if modified incorrectly. It is absolutely critical that certified technicians make any modifications or repairs to these engines, because if a technician who is not up to date with manufacturer repair and or service practices, they could unwittingly be putting the user and their families at risk when they are out on the water. Even something as simple as installing the wrong spark plug can cause irreparable damage to the engine. Several times during the year, we'll have boats brought in for service that have had incorrect spark plugs installed, many times by non-certified shops. In many cases, by just installing the incorrect or will-fit spark plug can cause damage, performance, and also make the engine non-compliant with emission standards. So, when we inspect the engine, we can even smell raw gasoline residue that has been built up. Anyone can change spark plugs, but only a certified technician can understand why it matters to each specific engine. This is just one simple, but though common mistake that we see coming from non-compliant technicians. Another would be will fit. Somebody brought up starters. If you put a non-compliant starter in a stern drive, that becomes a very high explosion hazard. So, and it's done by somebody going to Napa, picking up a wool starter, and that's where the problem begins. Boaters depend on their equipment to operate properly when they're enjoying their time on the water, but this bill could cause boaters to be stranded out on the water without a working engine to get them back home. This would damage the confidence of consumers, put manufacturers and dealers in my industry. Recreational boating is the largest economic contributor to the outdoor recreation industry in Maine, contributing nearly $3 billion to the state's GDP. As we all know, there is no shortage of ways to enjoy Maine's beautiful outdoors. Introducing this legislation will push consumers out of our market and into other forms of recreation, dramatically affecting seasonal businesses like mine. Simply put, certified technicians provide insight that non-certified dealers cannot. They are educated, experienced experts in their field. When we want something fixed that would affect our lives, we go to someone who is trained in the field to repair it. Why then would we pass a bill that would potentially put boaters and their families at risk? Furthermore, as an industry, we are striving to give the consumer a better experience by having certified technicians work on specific engines and keep them out on the water and spending less time in the shop. I appreciate your consideration of these concerns and respectfully ask the committee to oppose LD 1977. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Do we have any questions from the committee? Representative Moriarty?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Brown, I'm glad that we've moved from cell phones and personal devices to boats. It helps me understand the situation a little bit more easily. Just a quick question for you. If a boat owner, for whatever reason, wants to take a shot at making a repair himself or herself, or going to somebody who has no idea what they're doing, don't they do that at their own risk? And how does that adversely affect you if they do take that step?
One, I think it adversely affects my industry every time Channel 13 has an article on where a boat has burned to the ground. They don't talk about how they put an insufficient starter in. People that are watching that only see the boat burning, and they hear about the fatalities. So that's how it, I think, affects this industry as a whole, as making it look like a dangerous venture, I guess you'd say. That would be one example I would give.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony, Mr. Brown.
Thank you very much.
Do I have anyone else who would like to testify in opposition to LD 1977? Welcome.
Good afternoon, committee. My name's Dave Hammond from Hammond Tractor Company. We're a 3-store John Deere Kubota dealer. We have locations in Union, Auburn, and Fairfield, Maine. We employ about 100 folks that work with us. Here to oppose the 1977, LD 1977. There's multiple things to talk about here, to be quite honest. One of the things, we've talked a lot about cell phones, we've talked about computers. The language of the bill, one of the big things for us, we have 15 or 20 different people here in the equipment world that own dealerships, work for dealerships, from construction companies to tractor dealerships. And it's nice to see some marine folks here today too. You know, what is a motor vehicle? I think that's part of the issue here. We talk about cell phones and computers, but you know, a motor vehicle and the definition of it, there's so many different variables of that. You know, is a standby generator that's out that runs the power when the lights go out, is that a motor vehicle? Right now it appears that this bill is more drafted for the electronics world. It shouldn't be anything to do with tractors or construction equipment or any aspect of that. And the reason for that is this. If you look at the bill and how it's written, the right to repair is a touchy subject because a lot of us dealers sit back and say, we really almost don't want, in essence, people possibly working on our equipment. But that's not what this bill is talking about. It's talking about working on the embedded software of the actual piece of equipment. That is actually the program within the tractor, within the excavator, within the diesel generator that runs the power. It's the software end of it. If you start messing with software and embedded electronics within a machine, you have all kinds of concerns. You have safety concerns. In essence, you have environmental concerns. I've heard people talk today about all the cell phones that go in the garbage, and we have environmental concerns. If you start allowing people to change embedded software within our industry, from marine to boating to tractors to construction, you're in essence going to have environmental concerns. Your safety is a big one. I mean, in essence, basically, parts of this bill speaks to the point of changing software and embedded software, which could allow potential people to take a 200 horsepower tractor and make it a 300 horsepower tractor. Of course, it's not designed to be a 300 horsepower tractor. It's designed to be a 200 horsepower tractor. At the end of the day, if you're gonna turn a tractor that's 200 horsepower into a 300 horsepower tractor, you're gonna have a safety concern. It's gonna blow more diesel exhaust out the exhaust that it's not designed for. And then there's just so many variables about it. In general, you know, I think you need to have definition of what a motor vehicle is, and then you also need to look at the safety and environmental impact by it. One of the things that I heard early in our testimony was people want to be able to have the right to repair their own piece of equipment. All right, well, at the end of the day, I know in the equipment world, on the farm equipment side, and I think it's mandated by January 21st, or not mandated, but January 1st, 2021, most equipment manufacturers are going to have access to supply consumers with devices that will allow them to do many of their own repairs. Currently, as a John Deere dealer now, we supply technical manuals in order for people to be able to repair their own equipment. We might not have the computer laptop for them to plug into it. Certain companies already have that. John Deere has it. They've had it for 18 months. So something was said earlier about you have to have a technician come out to program your tractor. Deere's had that out. It's called Customer Service Advisor. They have it. They can buy it. They can have a subscription to it. They can do a lot of that themselves already. So that's a misnomer that most Deere has it, and most companies are following, and by the end of this year they're going to have that available to consumers. So you know it's a safe way for customers to be able to help diagnose their problems on their equipment, and in essence, fix some of their own equipment. But it doesn't change the ability for them to limit any type of safety mechanism on the tractor. It doesn't allow them to change software that makes a tractor be able to go from 25 miles per hour to 40 miles per hour. It doesn't do any of that. It just helps them basically diagnose and be able to fix their tractor. You know, that's one of the big things about this bill. It's written in a way you shouldn't be dealing with embedded software and being able to change that due to the safety concerns. And one of the things that I would encourage all of the committee, we have 3 locations, and most of my counterparts here that in essence have equipment dealerships from Fort Kent to southern Maine. We would enjoy having the committee to come to any of our locations, and we can show you what we can provide to customers to help them fix their own tractors or construction equipment or anything that really has a diesel engine, gas engine, what have you. But the bill is written more for the electronics and cell phones and computer industry. It should not have anything to do with what we do for forestry equipment, construction, and farm equipment. So.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hammond. Do I have any questions from the committee? Representative Moriarty?
Mr. Hammond, I have one question. You just referred to a mandate effective at the end of the current year. Where does that come from?
I don't think it was a mandate. I think basically, and I apologize for saying that earlier, the equipment suppliers, Case, New Holland, John Deere, a bunch of these folks got together because there's this growing concern about having the right to repair. So all of these manufacturers basically have agreed to offer this to the public. So I don't believe it was mandated. I think they all agreed, and they all, as a collective group, agreed that by the first day of January 2021, they would have the ability to sell the tooling and the training to consumers that want that. Of course, they're going to have to pay for it, just like anybody would.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, members of the committee.
Do you have anyone else who would like to testify in opposition to LD 1977? Welcome.
Hi. Excuse me. Good afternoon, Chairwomen and members of the committee. My name is Danielle Dean. I represent CompTIA. We're a nonprofit trade association that represents over 200 businesses within the IT and tech space. One of the major revenue drivers for us is IT certification. So we help train people up and into getting IT jobs. We have a foundation that really works to help hire veterans, women, and people of color to also get into this industry. So it is definitely an issue that we're very passionate about. I won't belabor what you've heard from other people here because we represent such a broad range of companies across the IT and tech industry. I was not surprised to hear that we had people from the boating industry all the way through a variety of other, like the Video Game Association as well, because our members are similarly situated. This isn't just about an iPhone or a computer. This really, the way this bill has been drafted is, it impacts so many of people in our industry. I want to really focus on the privacy and security concerns for my time. And, we talked about, you heard it before, talking about changing embedded software. You hear about, giving access to the firmware from these companies to these independent repair providers with really no assurances that they're offering these services in a secure manner. So nothing in the bill says that there's any assurances that sensitive information is secured or properly handled, which manufacturers do require from authorized repair shops. There's no cybersecurity or internal security practice requirements, and there's no vetting and training requirements. So these are major issues. If you're going to provide access to information to these independent repair providers in the same manner that you're offering to authorized repair providers that you've already heard have already invested all of this time, are very engaged in being able to repair these products safely and securely, then this is something that we absolutely care about and wouldn't want to see move forward. So I respectfully, on behalf of CompTIA, oppose this legislation and would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Dean.
Yeah.
Senator Guerin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Have you been to other hearings in other states?
This is my first hearing.
Okay, this question is not for you then.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions from the committee? Representative Stetkus.
Thank you. So you're communicating with people with industries nationally?
Yes, that's right.
Do you have a perspective on if Maine was the only state to pass a piece of legislation like that, would that positively or negatively impact our business climate in your types of industries?
I mean, it's definitely not a good thing for Maine, in our opinion. This is something that we have seen, like was mentioned earlier, last year in 2019, 20 states did consider this legislation, and it didn't even make it out of any chamber. I think one state made it out of committee. So I think overall, as we're having these discussions and we talk to our businesses, and obviously they are very engaged on this issue, it's definitely something that they oppose.
Thank you.
Any other questions from members of the committee? Seeing none. Thank you very much
Yeah,
for
thank
being
you.
here today. Yeah. Anyone else that wishes to testify on LD 1977? Yes, and as a reminder, thank you all for signing in and telling us who you are and where you're from. We appreciate that.
Would you mind terribly if I move these chairs that
Sure.
are behind here? Thank you.
Always asking for special treatment, this one.
I know. I've seen people struggle all day, and I figured, you know what, let's take away the hazard. I know this isn't the Labor Committee today.
We always need a doer in the crowd.
Exactly.
Thank you,
There it
Mr.
is.
Dorn. Yeah.
So, Chairwoman Herbig, I think Madam or Chairwoman Daughtry has left. I'm Dana Duran with the Professional Logging Contractors of Maine Trade Association that represents logging and trucking contractors in the state, and I'm here to testify in opposition to LD 1977. I apologize, I did not bring testimony with me today. I actually did not plan to testify in front of the committee today, but I feel compelled and I can send in my comments after the fact. But when Senator Carpenter introduced the bill and started talking about skidders, it started to raise the hair on the back of my neck. And our trade association represents about 200 member companies throughout the state. They harvest about 85% of all the wood that's harvested is done by one of our members. They employ a little over 3,000 people, and they're the ones who buy the skidders that you've heard about, the fella bunchers, the equipment with the funny name. So I wanted to just go on record while I have a few minutes and brief you on a couple of key items, and then also bring up the statute that was asked, I think, of Senator Jackson earlier. So our members have not identified this as an issue. No one with a skidder has called me and said this is an issue that they have, and I'll tell you why. They do not buy equipment from dealers unless those dealers provide the service that they require. I mean, hands down, they will not buy the equipment. They must have service. Downtime in this business cannot happen. They do not get paid enough money to be able to have equipment that goes down that cannot be serviced. So that's number one. There was a comment made that there aren't enough service technicians. Again, I go back to that same comment. They will not buy equipment from a dealer if they cannot have it serviced. Mr. Hammond brought up the fact that John Deere for their tractors provides basically internet-based service with their computer-based systems. This has existed in forestry equipment for quite a long time. It's available now. And I talked to one of my members up in the Peru area earlier today, and he said he's been given by the dealer a computer system that he pays a lot for to be able to then be provided with the codes if that equipment goes down, because that equipment cannot sit idle. So he works very closely with those dealers and with the manufacturers on that. So that the codes are there. And lastly, I will say I had a member who bought a skidder from another contractor, and that contractor who bought that skidder had a Tier 4 engine in it. Tier 4 engines were required by the federal government in 2014 to effectively reduce emissions by 95% for particulates. So they are some of the cleanest equipment that is out there for diesel emissions. So that Tier 4 engine, the exhaust system, has a lifetime warranty. That part had to be replaced. He had bought it from another contractor. That warranty was not voided. Had he gone and done that service work, it would have been voided. And so we have to make sure that, again, those warranties exist for the life of that equipment. Last thing I want to do, and if you'll just indulge me. So I looked up Section 29, or excuse me, Title 29A, Section 42, which is referenced in the bill, and it exempts motor vehicles. And there was a question from the committee, I think it was of Senator Jackson, are tractors exempt? Are they part of motor vehicles? They are not. And I'm going to read to you, again, if you'll indulge me, 29A, Section 42, motor vehicle. Motor vehicle means a self-propelled vehicle not sorry, I just lost it. That is for the conveyance of someone from point to point. So what's the definition of a vehicle? Also in 29A, Section 91 says vehicle means a device for conveyance of persons or property on a way. Vehicle does not include conveyances propelled or drawn by human power. And now I'm going to lastly go to 29A, Section 82. Tractor is defined. Tractor means a motor vehicle used primarily off-highway for farming, forestry, or other similar types of activities. So 29A, Section 42, does not exempt forestry equipment or farming equipment. It only exempts motor vehicles. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear while I'm here before you and read that to you because I brought the statutes with me. So with that, I'll answer any questions. And again, thank you for hearing from me.
Thank you for the clarifying
Absolutely.
information. Questions? Yes, Representative Handy.
Thank you for being here. So in our statutes, are agricultural equipment and, well, agricultural and logging equipment defined?
They are, yes.
Okay, so it would be that statute we'd have to reference to exempt.
To exempt, correct. You would have to, again, it's in 29A, it's subsection 101, number 82.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Seeing no further questions, thank you
Thank
for
you
being
very
here
much, and
today.
thank you for letting me move the chairs. I appreciate it.
No, I think that was a good decision. Yep. I apologize, we didn't think of it earlier. All right. Anyone else? Yes, opposition to LD 1977.
Excuse me. Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to testify today.
Actually, and before you get started, I just want to thank, I know a lot of you have been waiting here for several hours now, and I just want to say thank you for your time. I know a lot of you have taken time away from your businesses to be here, and we just appreciate you and your patience, so thank you.
So my name is Walter Alcorn. I'm with the Consumer Technology Association. We represent manufacturers and retailers of consumer electronics. So some of the devices that have been talked about today, cell phones, computers, printers, we represent manufacturers and retailers of those devices. I'm the Vice President for Environmental Affairs and Industry Sustainability. So what I wanted to do is really focus on some of the environmental issues that have been raised, just very quickly. Issue that's been raised about e-waste and concern about how not passing legislation like this might increase e-waste. I would remind the committee that actually Maine does have a robust e-waste law and program in place. It is something actually we're talking with DEP about making better and maybe some administrative changes, but it is very much in place right now. This is not, we're not looking at a situation where we're having e-waste in Maine going into landfills. The other thing that I would note is nationally, in the United States, U.S. EPA says that e-waste is the fastest declining part of the municipal solid waste stream. That was not true 15 years ago when I first started working on e-waste issues, but it is true today. So, and I'm happy to put this in writing and share the links with all of you. So, in fact, the environmental footprint of the electronics industry from a waste standpoint is declining. The other thing that was cited previously was the number of cell phones that get disposed of. That I've seen that referenced in testimony before. If you search and search and search on EPA's website, you have to go into an archived page to find that, and if you read it, it actually is the number of cell phones that are no longer used and are given away or handed off or recycled or disposed in any given year. So at CTA, we do every couple of years a consumer survey to find out what consumers do with their mobile devices. And I just want to share with you some of the results that put that number into perspective. What we found is that about a third of consumers actually do something with their smartphone or other mobile device in any given year. So 2/3 of us don't do anything with our smartphones and mobile devices. A third of us get rid of them in one way or another. Only 2% of all smartphone owners actually dispose of them in the trash. So it's very rare. And there's a really good reason for this. I think, we all know that these things are valuable. 10 times as many people actually trade in their smartphone or mobile device as throw it away. We also have 4 times as many that actually give it away, either to a relative or a friend. 3 times as many as throw it in the trash, actually recycle it, and 3 times as many actually sell it. So what this shows, I think the only way that you have value in these things is for reuse purposes, for refurbishment and reuse. There's not enough value in these things from a recycling perspective to make money off of it. So what I think that shows overall is that there is actually a very robust market right now for repair and resale of these devices. And I think what a lot of you have heard today is a battle amongst companies who are doing that business. So you have one set of companies fighting another to get the business. And I understand, and there are a lot of complicated issues, but thank you for looking into this. I think I would recommend that you do look at studying this. I think that's a really good idea because there are a lot of issues, including a lot of the ones raised by other manufacturing industries and equipment industries that apply to consumer technology devices as well. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for being here today. Yes, Senator Guerin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think you brought up a really good point about the post-use of your old phones. I've given them to my children. I've given them to my mother. Last week, I dropped mine at the garage and it was run over. But when I took it in, hoping they could get the information off it for my new phone, they offered to recycle it for me. Do you want your phone back, or would you like me to recycle this? That was Verizon. So are most of the providers suggestive selling, recycling?
Yes. What we've seen, and again, this is really driven by the economics of the reuse market. So as a policy, most carriers and retailers will take back any smartphone that anybody brings in. They'll basically put it towards reuse and refurbishment if it hasn't been run over, if there's value. But by and large, they'll take anything, and that covers the recycling cost. So basically, the value that's gotten from the sale in the reuse market, for example, is it's enough to cover the recycling cost.
Okay, thank you.
I think we're all going to have to be a little more careful around Senator Guerin. Any other questions from members of the committee? No, seeing none, thank you very much. Yeah, anyone else that wishes to testify in opposition to LD 1977?
This was the worst story. He dropped it off to be worked on my husband. Put the groceries in that extra. To be continued.
Good afternoon, Senator and esteemed members of the committee. My name is Ken Kieran, and I've been debating all afternoon whether or not to read my prepared script, due respect to Lewis. And this has gone back and forth and up and down, so if you'll bear with me, I will go ahead. My name is Ken Kieran. I'm the owner, general manager of Union Farm Equipment. We're located on Route 17 in Union and have been selling and servicing tractors, light construction, outdoor power equipment since 1949. I'm here today to voice opposition to LD 1977. I've been a part of Union Farm for nearly 25 years, and throughout that time, we have supported and encouraged our customers to perform routine maintenance and otherwise work on their equipment whenever possible. Our friendly folks' reputation is built upon the premise of helping and guiding our customers whenever we can, and we help our customers, be they commercial or consumer, to minimize their downtime. As such, I support the Equipment Dealers Association proposed common sense repair solutions. David was talking about this, and these include access to manuals, product guides, service training, electronic diagnostic tools. I do, however, have concerns with how this legislation and how it appears that it will be unregulated and complete access to the embedded software and control systems built into this equipment. Like in nearly everything else, electronics and electronic controls are integral components of the power equipment products we sell and service. These components provide for optimum performance and ensure the equipment meets all the safety and emission standards as required by federal, state, and local laws. I'm very concerned with the safety ramifications of providing people the means to modify and otherwise override the aforementioned safety and emission systems. And I'm equally concerned with where such modifications will leave me when I discover something has been improperly modified. As the manufacturer's rep, it is my responsibility and obligation to ensure that the emission systems and all safety mechanisms are in place and in proper operating condition. As this legislation provides for unfettered access to the system's information, I have no question that we will see equipment in our shop with safety and or emissions modifications. Regardless of whether I can determine when or by whom the modifications were made, it stands to reason that it would become my responsibility and obligation to address and restore these systems to their original factory settings. This is all work that can easily be performed by the dealership, but these systems are expensive, and our customers are going to balk at the cost and at the need. And unless the customer agrees to do the repair work first, we as dealers will find ourselves with little legal recourse as we fight to get paid. The reason I asked to speak was for a far worse scenario. I envision this piece of equipment being modified and changing hands without involving a dealer, and the new owner unknowingly finding themselves in possession of a piece of equipment that no longer operates as originally designed. Yes, the systems and all of our systems are sometimes annoying and cumbersome, but no one will argue that the myriad safety and emissions features serve a critically important role. And operating a modified piece of equipment without said controls could easily result in property damage, personal injury, or the loss of life. As I said in the beginning, I support providing the ability to work on and repair one's equipment, and Union Farm Equipment actively assists and guides people in performing their own repairs. Our guidance, however, is reliant upon the presence and the use of all proper safety and control features. The access to systems information as provided in this legislation would enable modifications that would negate any of this knowledge. Reading through the legislation, perhaps this is why Item 3 addresses digital electronic equipment and includes any product dependent upon digital electronics, while specifically excluding the motor vehicles. Like automobiles and trucks, tractors and outdoor power equipment are very powerful, they're productive, and they're potentially dangerous pieces of equipment. And while everyone wants to support the ability to work on our own equipment, I ask that we not create a system that could directly result in property damage or the loss of life. I would like to add one point. I have had some involvement with the sales tax bureaus, and our equipment is specifically referred to as off-road power equipment, and it is excluded, as that gentleman was saying, from automotive rules, regulations, and laws. And we don't do inspections and things. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Kieran, for being here. Questions from members of the committee? All right, thanks for traveling here today and being here. Anyone else that wishes to testify in opposition to LD 1977?
We're about to move into a second sheet here for you.
Great.
I don't know if this is the longest the committee's gone so far this year, but I will try to be brief.
This is our second meeting, so yes.
Okay.
Record breaking.
Hopefully not setting a template for you.
I think we're doing okay.
Okay. All right.
If you want to keep it short, though,
I
Mr.
will.
Picard.
I absolutely will. Senator Herbig and distinguished members of the committee, I'm Curtis Picard, President and CEO of the Retail Association of Maine and a resident of Topsom, representing more than 350 retailers of all sizes across the state. Maine retailers employ more than 85,000 Mainers, and we're here to testify in opposition of LD 1977. So I'm not going to repeat what other folks have said, and I'm not going to read my testimony. I do want to hit on a couple points. Mr. Alcorn did a really good job talking about Maine's e-waste program. But I would also urge the committee that the Maine Department of Environmental Protection produces a product stewardship report every year. The latest report came out last Wednesday, so it's on their website. And over the last couple of years, they have specifically talked about the cell phone reuse program and the success of that. And while they're not recommending it yet, the market is so robust that they're getting close to recommending that we don't even need this program anymore because the secondary market is there. So Maine was the very first state to pass an e-waste law. It provided to be the template for a lot of other states. So yes, we do a really good job with e-waste, and that gets detailed in that product stewardship report each year. So I would urge you to take a look at that. My second point would be, we've talked a lot about cell phones and farm equipment and boats and other stuff. The one thing that all these retailers also have in common is point of sale machines and credit card machines. That is also a digital electronic product. You as a legislative body have done a lot of work trying to protect consumer privacy and pass legislation in that regard. Passage of LD 1977 would serve to undo a lot of those privacy concerns. So I don't know about you, but there can be a lot of information stored on your particular point of sale or credit card processing system, and you would not want an unauthorized user to be able to tap into that and use that. And then my final point is something else that hasn't been brought up. Maine also has a very robust implied warranty law. And the Attorney General's office has spent quite a bit of time over the last couple of years updating it. So the last update came out in October last year. So I linked it on my testimony. I would urge you to take a look at that. It's something consumers do use fairly frequently here in Maine, as many of my retailers will tell you. So I'll stop there, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Picard. Any questions from the committee? Representative Stetkis.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Curtis. I guess where you cover so many different businesses, so many types of businesses, and as you know, we're in the emergency portion of this the legislative year. Are you seeing, or your business is seeing, some sort of backlog that may be considered an emergency where we need to deal with this right away?
In my opinion, no. As you've heard other folks testify, this has cropped up in a number of states. It's a model bill. No state has passed this yet. The only state that did do something was Vermont, which had a study. They spent 6 months studying it, and at the end said, we're not going to recommend legislation. So I guess it's Maine's turn now.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Anyone else that would like to testify in opposition to LD 1977?
Maybe that can be your last.
Jinxed us, man. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Michael Sullivan. Senator Herbig, Representative Dowdy, and other members of the committee, thank you for letting me be here today. My name is Mike Sullivan. I'm a resident of Gorham, and I'm here on behalf of Nortrax and John Deere in opposition of LD 1977. I wrote something down this morning so I thought I could put it into some general terms so everybody can understand. First of all, Nortrax is a 100% owned division of John Deere, representing John Deere Construction and Forestry heavy equipment products. We have locations in Westbrook, Herman, Holton, and Fort Kent, and we employ 62 Maine residents. Should heavy equipment manufacturers and dealers be required by law to make available the information and equipment necessary for a diagnosis and repair of electronic problems encountered with heavy equipment, the consequences could lead to many operational changes of the equipment, including safety and emission changes, which could lead to unsafe operation, improper repairs, and altered emissions. And I thought maybe I'd put down some examples for you, since a lot of this may seem kind of foreign to anyone that isn't around this all the time. An untrained technician would have the ability to alter emissions output or bypass the emissions settings altogether because the owner does not want to buy any diesel exhaust fluid, or buy a new diesel particulate filter, or is trying to sell the unit to a non-emission regulated country. These changes are possible through settings in the electronic control unit, should the technician have untethered access to the information and the equipment from the OEM. This would allow the machine to emit unchecked amounts of nitrous oxides, particulate matter, which is also black soot, into the atmosphere, eradicating all the progress the federal and state exhaust tier level programs over the past 20 years have gained. Second example, an untrained technician would have the ability to alter electronic settings for an engine speed limiter or transmission settings, allowing an operator to drive a large piece of machinery at excessive speeds on public roadways while going from job to job or possibly snow plowing. Therefore, the machine would be going faster than the steering or brakes can react in a safe manner, which could endanger others or the operator. We've all seen the equipment going down the road at a fast rate of speed. Motor graders go very fast. And if they could go faster and faster, then they couldn't stop or steer out of the way in time. My third example is this. An untrained technician would have the ability to alter something as simple as a parking brake. Most heavy equipment is put into neutral when parked, and an electronic/electric controlled parking brake, it's not the old pull-up one like everybody's used to, that's manual and you can fix by yourself. It's electric. And that has to be engaged every time the machine is put in park. This could be altered via an electronic control unit setting should anyone have the ability to gain access. We all know the consequences that could come from this. Please consider amending this legislation or dismissing action on this legislation. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Do we have any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone else who would like to testify in opposition to LD 1977?
just me.
Welcome.
I do. Representative Daughtry, distinguished members of the committee, my name is Matt Marks. I live in Scarborough, and I represent the Associated General Contractors of Maine. Actually, in this case, would be the customers. One of the unique things about the construction industry, and particularly our relationship with the equipment suppliers, is that it is a partnership. The equipment has grown more complex. While we all employ technicians, we really do rely on the dealer relationship. And I can tell you that relationship has been very strong. You see the turnout here today. It's funny, those familiar faces are together often with our contractor members. In fact, when this bill actually came up, I think the first 4 or 5 phone calls I got were from general contractors using the equipment who said, we're very concerned about this. So why are they concerned about it? I think you heard very good reasons about why folks want to make sure that their equipment is meeting environmental compliance and why it's also meeting safety compliance. On the environmental side today, I spent a good part of the afternoon sitting on the Climate Council subgroup on transportation. There we were trying to figure out how to ensure that trucks and equipment were not only doing the things we expect them to do, but how we ensure that over time and keep improving it. In my opinion, this would be a giant step backwards in that. And this, for folks that are here today, they know the last 10 years and what that looked like to get the diesel engine to where it is, performing at the way it is today. The second piece is safety. So anytime we start meddling with the equipment in the sense that we can alter the computer portion of it is very, very critical to the fact that we are ensuring that that piece of equipment can perform as it was specified by the manufacturer. And in our opinion, when we look at that, we really have to make sure that we're also adhering to federal OSHA regulations. My question is, and I haven't talked to the OSHA director, but this could get very convoluted because now we're talking about the computer systems. That's going to get a lot tougher for not only OSHA to investigate, but for any incident that happens or could happen, could become even more complex. And the last thing is this. I really believe, and I think you heard it today from Dana Duran, that your relationship and our relationship with the equipment manufacturers has been excellent. They have field folks who assist either by remote, who are there in the field, but it's just been a great partnership, and that's how we kind of look at the industry. So I urge you, however you move forward with this bill, that you really consider this. And you look around the room today, there's a lot of small business owners, a lot of Mainers who are here today saying together that this could cause a very significant problem for our entire industry. With that, that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Marks. Do you have
Thank
any
you.
questions from the committee? Representative Austin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This may sound like a softball, but maybe we'll close out with a softball, right? We'll do the 7th-inning stretch, I don't know. Do you think Maine is just a common example of this kind of partnership, or do we kind of excel because we're kind of remote? We have to depend on each other up here in the corner of the good old states. Can you address that? In other words, we really don't maybe need some of this. We do have good relationships. We work together. We're worried about our customers. We're worried about the safety. So that's a softball, but I really do want to hear your answer.
Well, I think, nationally, our organization and contractors and those suppliers and service providers have a very close relationship. I would say it's more unique here in Maine because of the fact our nature. We tend to help people who need assistance, but also the fact that they know that the folks who just spoke before you, they know their cell phone numbers. they know how to get a hold of those people. So if they're not getting the answer they need, I'm sure Mike is going to get a call no matter what time of the day, even if he's plowing snow at 1 a.m. and somebody didn't get back to him, he's going to hear about it. And that's something that relationship is just valued here in Maine. It's our culture. So that partnership is very important to us, and I think out of that, we've been able to overcome and also solve a whole bunch of societal problems related to environmental controls and safety, and I hope that that continues in that fashion. So.
Thank you. Any other
Got it.
questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your time, Mr. Marks. Do we have anyone else who would like to testify in opposition to LD 1977? Going once? Going twice? And with that, any testimony neither for nor against LD 1977? Almost. Seeing none, close this hearing on LD 1977. Thank you, everyone who
That
came
was
today.
fun.
We appreciate your patience for what's been a
I'm
long
going to-
hearing. And the
You know,
work
we
session
gotta
will
do
be
a
posted.
count
You
of how many
can touch
people
base with
were
our committee
in
clerk to
support
make
of
sure
it
that you're
versus
informed
opposed,
of the
because
date
I
of the
think
hearing,
only
or
about
the
4
work session.
people, 4 or 5 people was in support, and then you had
That was
about
one of my fans.
and you had
that
about
drove me.
15, 20 people in oppose, and all of them
Those
came from these
listening, that concludes
large
our business.
organizations, right?
Starts at 55 millimeter. Yeah, so that was fun. So we will see. I have a lot of editing to do. I need to re-upload my testimony because my testimony got blanked out by, thank you, Verizon. Thank you. Can you hear me now? No, you can't for $100 a month.
Timing of when it cut off. Impeccable timing. I didn't even touch it, and then it just cut off, and I saw F.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Like, I wasn't prepared to be the co-sponsor of the bill and the I was not prepared to be the co-sponsor of the bill in addition to having to do the work of fighting all the fallacious arguments. And I would have preferred to show up at the end, but I couldn't show up at the end because they have the pros go first, the cons go later. I wished I would have mentioned the points about modifying versus repairing. I wish I would have really touched more on the Nebraska Farm Bureau supporting this 176-1 and the fact that everybody here today was paid. But that's something that I got to deal with later, and I definitely got to deal with getting a different lens because this is fucking ridiculous. But I'm glad that I got this because at the very least you were able to see what was going on there. I do have the camera right up against the corner so that you could at least see people over there. Sorry about the lens thing. There was nothing else available. I am going to start carrying spares from now on. I am going to pack everything up, go back to my hotel, and I will see you all later.
And I just want to say, whoever came ahead and watched the whole thing, thank you so much. At least you guys were more prepared or more informed about what was going on. I couldn't believe it, how long this was and how much opposition there was. It's insane. And then, of course, as always, we want to go ahead and thank everyone who went ahead and supported us with this. A lot of this was actually funded by our Patreons who helped go ahead and offset a lot of the costs. So thank you. And we need to get some sleep.
Can somebody remember which person brought up the person of color and woman aspect of it? Because I heard someone mention person of color and woman in it, and what does this have to do with that? I'm really genuinely confused. Perhaps it's just because I need food or sleep or something, but, has Repair ever done anything that's anti-minority that I know of? Because I did hear that brought up, and I'm genuinely confused and concerned.
Yeah, we have to rewatch it back because it sounded like to me they felt that that company or whatever provided them opportunities for minorities. Yeah.
They provide opportunity for you to spend $350 so that you can get a A+ certificate that shows that you know how many FireWire 400 devices you can daisy chain, which is a protocol that has not been used regularly in about 14 years now. But they still keep it included on the test because why the hell not? You're required to get it for most government jobs, so they keep getting money for nothing. They're rent seekers, pure and simple.
Yeah, so yeah, I don't know when we might be able to get this video up. We need to get some sleep for sure.
This battery lasted like 2 or 3 hours. It still has about 40% left, and this battery is 7 years old. And I bought it used. So Sony makes a really nice camera. I just got to get in the lens. But I have a lot to go over back at the hotel. This is going to be a ridiculous amount of editing. I am in the middle of nowhere, so one thing that is frustrating is I don't know if I'm actually going to be able to upload any of this stuff for quite a while until I get home and the file's available again. But at the very least, I think I can encode all of them, and I can do all the editing now. See, I really do want to make it a priority to upload my segments, so even if I have to transfer that to my cell phone and find some place here that actually has more than 2 bars of service, I will do it so I can get that up by tonight, and I am sorry that it did happen to go out during the middle of my testimony. Thank you to everybody who waited through an hour of talk about propane just to be able to listen to the stream. Thank you so much for supporting what we do. And, I'm going to continue showing up to every single one of these hearings, and it is what it is. We pushed, we created awareness today, even if we didn't win. But next time, I'm going to come back to every single one of these in every single state, every single time I have the chance, and perhaps even speak with the senators and assembly people before the bill, similar to how Charlie Brown said he would, so that we can at least get a dialogue going. And I'll see you next.